Chapter 25. Friendship. Legion. Friendship. You hold on to friends by keeping your heart a little softer than your head. You may think you know what you are in possession of, but you do not, the shadowy figure continued. Izuku quickly felt himself getting angry. And one day, the shadowy figure scoffed. It will be mine again. Again. Izuku thought as his eye twitched, sparks appearing over his hair and fist. It means more to me than you will ever know. The shadowy figure leaned forward. I would prefer to avoid any further violence and encourage a moment of consideration, he continued. I urge you, make the right decision and return it to me. Slam. Izuku breathed harshly in anger as he raised his fist from the ruined remains of the Hola recorder. Young Midoriya, Nizu said in slight admonishment. He thinks he can threaten me about Eri? I'll tear him apart. Izuku screamed. Izuku, calm down. We don't even know who he is, Toshinori said, laying a supportive hand on Izuku's shoulder. It's obvious, Spear. It's the Yakuza that had her in the first place, he replied as he turned sharply to his father. Indeed, although we do not know the exact location, I've been able to at least identify who the likely figure is, Nizu said as he pulled up a screen with various images, the center two being a man in a green coat with a bird mask and a flower-like symbol. Meet Chisaki Kai, the current leader of the Shy Hasakai, although he currently goes by his alias, Overhaul. Who is he to demand Eri and refer to her as an object? What kind of person even does that? Izuku snarled. Easy, Midoriya. Easy. For now, the best solution would be to assign a clone to guard her at all times when you aren't able to be near her, Nizu said, trying to calm down the boy whom he knew had some bad temperamental issues when it came to threatening his loved ones, which, while good to have, often could blind one from making logical decisions. Taking some deep breaths, Izuku thought about how to handle this in the best and most logical way before activating his wrist comm. Locke, could you come to Nizu's office for a bit? I have a very important job for you, he said, a dead serious tone of voice. A few minutes later, a clone entered and saluted the three. Captain Locke, reporting for duty, sir. What is the assignment? I need you to form a group specifically to protect Eri and any friends she makes. Is that understood? Looking at his older brother slightly confused, Locke took a couple of minutes to think before nodding. Understood, Orivod. I shall begin the assembly of Horn Company, Locke said before heading off. Good. I won't allow her to suffer like that ever again. Izuku appreciated the pun, but at the moment he was too pissed off to really enjoy it. None of us will, Izuku. Clenching his fists, he felt his nails dig into his skin over the absolute outrageous demand Chisaki had made during the recording. If he wanted Eri back, he would have to pry her from his and his brother's cold, dead hands. Wanting to break the tension, Toshinori cleared his throat to get his attention. Wasn't today the day where you, your brothers and friends were planning on painting each other's armors? Yeah, Izuku said, calming himself down a bit. The VOD have been pretty excited, especially after that mess with Rex. Better get going then. We can't have the guest of honor be late, now can we? Toshinori said with a grin, to which the freckled teen returned, before excusing himself with a bow and making his way down the hallway, outside and towards Topeka dorms. Humming to himself, he looked to the sky and noticed the clouds quickly graying, before a drop of rain landed squarely on his nose, prompting him to fasten his pace before he got soaked to the bone. Don't worry about it. Eri will be surrounded by a company of brothers at all times now, and she's here in UA with a ton of heroes, including All Might, he heard Nana say from the mindscape. Besides, I think you have other things to worry about. Weren't you going to talk to her today? Izuku suddenly flushed before moving forward, unwilling to respond. He'd spent the last few days practicing what he was going to say, and hopefully all would go well. Just barely reaching the door before the downpour, Izuku entered inside of the building where he was greeted by Bly, giving him a small salute and a smile, with the greenet noticing the new yellow stripes on his armor. New colors, Bly? They suit you. He smiled, pulling him into a hug before being led inside to the living room where the others from both 1A and 1B who'd formed friendships with the clones had arrived, including May. Thanks, Mandalore. Nimurm, Midnight Sensei helped me with them. Izuku raised a brow but decided to ignore it. He trusted Bly to know what he was doing. Besides, it wasn't the first time he'd heard a clone call a teacher by their first name. Present Mike apparently almost had a heart attack when he heard Pons call Aizawa by his first name. Although apparently the two had gotten drunk. Yeah, that was the first time that RG had torn Aizawa a new one for accidentally giving Pons an alcoholic juice pack. Goes to show what continuous lack of sleep does to you. Well, look who's finally here. Parsley, you sure took your time. Setsuna laughed along with Waxer, Boyle, and Mayhem while she sat with a small brush and some orange and red paint, the reptilian girl currently painting a small red triangle on Boyle's helmet. Sorry, I had something I needed to talk about with Principal Nizu, Izuku replied sheepishly, before he looked around the room to see how the different people interacted. It's fine, it's fine. Talks with the principal takes priority after all, he heard her say, before she went back to painting. Shoto was off to a corner with Jet and a few others. He noticed how they were doing two colors to represent his power, and he was proud of his progress. Kyoka and Denki were actually working on each other's helmets of all things, making him chuckle as he passed by with a wave. Denki eagerly waving back while Kyoka nodded. Blitz, Cut Up, and a few others were near them, painting their own armor too. The former putting on some electric yellow stripes along the diamond pattern comma, while Cut Up painted his with blue patterns, an eel-looking creature on the right side of his helmet he'd seen in a movie and the number 4 on the chest plate, and coloring the upper and forearm armor different shades of blue with a stripe going through the middle. Moving forward, he saw Tenya walking over to where the misfits were with his new armor pieces, the group welcoming him with open arms.
Ah, Izuku.
Good to see you. Come on, sit, he said, patting the chair next to him. Complying with the request, the freckled teen noticed something slightly odd about Tenya's new armor. You're giving it orange accents? I thought for sure it would either still be pure white, or with blue accents. Ah, very understandable to think. However, I'm painting it orange as well as blue as a homage to these two who helped me keep my head on straight in Hozu, the bespectacled teen said, gesturing to Waxer and Boyle who just breakfasted each other. Nodding, he looked at the other pieces and saw several of them had already been painted, before noticing a chest plate that seemed slightly bigger in the upper department. Hold up, you got armor, Tokage? Sure did, Parsley. And none of that Tokage stuff. I'm Setsuna, she said as she refocused on her armor. It had a mix of purple accents, and the armor itself only covered her vital areas to include her upper arms and thighs, leaving the rest only covered by the purple suit that was her earlier costume, for easy use of her quirk. It had been decided that due to her regenerative abilities, as well as the nature of her quirk, that a full set of armor would not be appropriate. She did have, however, a wrist comm. Yeah, the armor's got a ton of pieces, but that's just to keep up with my quirk. Although it won't work completely, at least it gives a good amount of protection, she said as she went back to the helmet, the front of it seeming to be retractable while painted like the face of a T-Rex. Izuku nodded in slight surprise. All right then. Heading off, he noticed Echo and Tsuyu, the pair customizing the girl's armor, which now looked a lot more hydrodynamic, the boots having small propellers built into the soles and retractable fins along with a rebreather on the back, the plating being in the same different nuances of green as her current costume. Monk was currently taking care of some of the fins, adding details and other things with the presumed intention of having the Scuba Squadron match her. The Scuba Squadron, like the Jetpack Squadron, was a relatively new addition to the VOD that had been put in production after Tsu's internship with Selkie, as Innsmouth had proven himself to be another type of villain they weren't ready for at that time. I do wonder where and when they'll come in handy, considering we're rarely close to water, he thought as he kept on walking. But we do live on an island, so... come on. Light up, you stupid log. He heard one of his brothers say, and saw him trying to start a fire in the fireplace, with little success. Oh, let me help, he heard Hatsum say, just as she bolted over with something on her wrist. Hold up, is that Jandash? Whoosh. Before being able to finish, his question was answered by the sound of a flamethrower spewing out its infernal contents into the fireplace, igniting the wood inside while the clones and students within 5 feet of her had jumped to cover. Hatsum-san, are you out of your mind? Tenya demanded, chopping the air as he marched over to the dreadlocked inventor to reprimand her. I concur. Using flamethrowers for just igniting fireplaces is way too over the top. A new voice called out from the door, making everyone turn their heads to see who had spoken. The voice belonged to a very familiar face dressed in a yellow rain jacket and an umbrella, with said person taking off her glasses to rub away the fog. Shield-san, Izuku said in joy and walked over to her to shake her hand, followed by those who had been with him at the Eye Expo. It's so nice to see you all again. Fordo, Rookie, Rex, Thorn, Noble, Stone, Thyre, Davis, Riss, Jack, Droidbait, she said, addressing all of the clones she knew by name, something that made them immensely happy. After taking off her raincoat and boots, she greeted everyone else present, even the 1B members, Jenny DS, support, and business course students who had befriended the VOD. Walking in front of the fireplace, she let out a small sigh as the flame warmed her up, with the sound of the rain colliding against the window and the crackling of the fire creating quite the cozy atmosphere. Holding her hands out to the flames, she quickly warmed herself up before turning to the group. Is Eri here? A slight squeak and said girl shyly approached her. Melissa smiled softly at her and pulled out a small box-looking object on wheels, making most of the people in there tilt their heads, but made Eri gasp in surprise before she gently took the object. Mousy! The mouse droid squeaked, and Eri set it down where it began to circle around her before running off, Eri chasing after it. Mousy? What's with that name? Oh, it's because SE6 sounds a bit like a mouse, Sue, Melissa said, while looking around at the people. So many beautiful girls and handsome boys here. She complimented them with a small smile as she began walking around. A few slightly ducked their heads, but as Melissa turned back towards the fire, her attention was caught by a starry-eyed May. Oh, hello there, she said with some cheer. You're Melissa Shield, daughter of Dr. David Shield. I've read all your papers on nanomachinery, particle physics, support tech compression, everything, May said with a nearly manic smile, causing Melissa to inch backwards slightly in nervousness. I have a proposal. You, me, make babies. She means her inventions, now. She grinned. I want to challenge myself. And what better way to do that than by challenging Island's prodigy? Melissa was slightly surprised, but smiled at the invitation. Well, I did bring some of the robots that were destroyed back at Island, so, she said, stepping to the side to reveal the pile of scrap metal she'd brought with her. Walking over, May knelt down and looked at the pile of metal. There's some stuff here that I've never seen before. Imagine what I can make with T-dash. She was cut off by herself snoring for a couple of seconds before she woke up again and began rambling on once again. Is she sleeping well? Melissa whispered to Noble, who had walked up to her. I don't think she even sleeps. He whispered back. Let's get started. May snapped, waking up from her short nap. Hold on there, what's your name again? Melissa asked.
May Hatsume.
CEO of Hatsum Industries, and soon to be the biggest name in support tech. Hatsum then, I'd love to do our little competition, but I can't challenge an opponent who's not at their best, so how about you get yourself some rest and tomorrow we can see who's best? Okay, May said before slumping over and snoring. Wow, I've never seen her just do that, Noble said, before looking at her. She should really have someone to tell her to rest who she actually listens to. That gives me an idea, Melissa said as designs began to flow in her mind, before she looked at Noble. But in the meantime, how about I help you paint your armor, Noble? I'd like that a lot, Melissa, Noble said as they headed off to another corner and began to work on his armor. Meanwhile, a pair of clones helped May into one of the few bunks that were still in the barracks so she could sleep somewhat comfortably. Izuku smiled as he saw all his friends paint alongside the clones and moved forward to where his best and closest friend was.
Ochako?
He asked as he approached her and Fives, who were currently painting each other's armor, with the latter excusing himself to give them some space. Hey Izuku, I've been waiting for you. Can you help me with my helmet? I've been adding this color to it, she said as she held up her new helmet. Izuku smiled as he sat down. I'd love to. Okay, Izuku, it's now or never. I need to do this sooner rather than later, he thought to himself, While swearing, he heard the VOD inside of his head munching popcorn. Looking back at the brunette, he was currently adding some detailing to the helmet. Being careful to not spill any of the paint on the visor, he took a deep breath to calm himself. Ochako. He began almost losing his nerve. There's something I'd like to talk about with you, in a more private setting if you don't mind. It's important. Sure thing, Izuku, Ochako said as they put down their armor pieces and let them dry. Walking away, he could feel the stares of the others behind him and knew that were it not for Rex, Thorn, and Kendo, Mina and Setsuna would be making a scene. Heading off to a side room that led to a balcony, they headed outside, the soft noise of the rain hitting the ground surrounding them. Izuku, is something wrong? Ochako asked in concern with her hand on his forearm as he gripped the railing, the boy slightly blushing at the attention and care that she was giving him. There's something. Izuku sighed. He wouldn't be able to do this just out of the blue. He needed to lead up to it. After closing his eyes and taking a few breaths, Ochako patiently waiting for him, he finally opened them and looked directly into her eyes, green meeting hazelnut, before he gently took her hand in his own, causing her to blush up a storm. There's something I need to give you, he said as he reached under his chest plate and pulled out the necklace that had the heart of iron. It's the final piece for your costume. Did anybody ever explain to you what a heart of iron is? He asked, the rain colliding against the roof of the balcony. No, what is it? She asked as she admired it. Izuku gently pulled out the necklace beneath his armor and placed the heart of iron in her palm so she could look at it better. She then looked back at him after a few moments of inspecting it. The heart of iron, or Biscarat Karta, is a symbolic piece of our armor. Django. Izuku swallowed upon saying the name but continued. Had the idea of having something that represented our hearts, our dedication, pride, unity, our duty, everything that makes us Mandakarla. Mandakarla? It means basically having the right stuff. Loyalty, tenacity, dedication. All the marks of someone belonging to the VOD. The clones, and I have been talking about it. They keep their hearts on the inside of their armor. It's more symbolic for them that way. However, for you guys, we wanted to give you hearts, like mine, Izuku said as he pointed to his chest, showing how it was of silver rather than the white in the necklace he'd given her. To show the world that as long as you carry that heart, you will always be one of the VOD. Ochako blushed even more, though it was less embarrassment and more in shock and awe as she realized just how important this was to Izuku and the VOD. When we went to the USJ, I found Django's heart there, and in keeping with our traditions, I now wear it on my armor. That's why I'd like you to have mine, he said, with the brunette just now realizing that the one she was currently holding in the necklace was Izuku's. Izuku, are you sure that you want me to have this? There is no one else I'd rather give it to. You were my first friend outside of the VOD. You've been with me every step of the way here at UA. From our entrance exam to the sports festival, you fought by my side, Izuku said, finally managing to find his words and move forward. And when I was broken by my brother's death, you comforted me, Izuku said, and they both remembered their private moment during the sports festival. There is no one else that I would trust both of my hearts to. Be both? Ochako squeaked out as her blush went atomic. Izuku slightly puffed his nose, a soft sigh of fondness escaping from him. No turning back now. I will be honest, Ochako. I care about you deeply. But recently, I found myself caring about you even more. Ochako couldn't even speak, her face absolutely burning. And I would very much like the honor of taking you out on a date, Izuku said as he softly smiled at her. That is, if you'll let me? Ochako stuttered, not finding her voice before finally squeaking and nodding rapidly. She'd use her hands to cover her face, but they were both occupied by Izuku's, so she settled on ducking her head. Yes, she finally managed to whisper. Great, Izuku said as he then raised up her left hand and gently kissed the back of it. I'll send you a message of the details later. How about we get back to painting? Sure, Ochako squeaked, slowly letting go. Izuku smiled one last time at her before extending his hand. Shall we go? You go on ahead. I just need to cool down a bit. she half said half-assed as her voice started cracking in pitch. Sure thing. I'll see you inside, Izuku said as he left her alone, his heart fluttering in his chest as he left her alone. Ochako, left alone in her thoughts, sighed as she fell to her knees and was finally able to cover her face with her hands. The cool metal of the heart of iron did nothing to help her burning face. Meanwhile, inside the mindscape, he did it. He frackin' did it. A clone cheered as he hugged one of his brothers. The inside of the mindscape was more or less a riot after the confession their older brother had made, with someone even blasting music. I never thought I'd see it while in here. Man, that must have taken balls. The one being hugged cheered. Nana, meanwhile, just sat with her arms crossed and smiled at the scenario that had played out in front of everyone. The mindscape had grown even more lively in the last few days, but certain things had caught her attention more than others. For example, the clone known as Rookie, a slightly underdeveloped clone that honestly shouldn't have snuck out like that, but was making his way in the world. Still though, it was interesting to see how the clone production process had changed and evolved. Idly tracing her hand over a particular pod in a large row, she smiled. She never thought that she'd be able to be something resembling a parent again, but Izuku and the VOD were full of surprises, with more along the way it seemed. Soon, Sayuri Ka, she whispered to the pod before floating away and checking on all the other pods. Why the cloning process had changed they may never know. But either way, she was excited to see the VOD expanding day by day. Walking back inside, Izuku was smiling like an idiot as he sat down on his chair again, not noticing every pair of eyes in the room being focused on him. Not paying attention to anything actually, he just grabbed the piece of armor he was working on and started to paint again. How do you think it went? Setsuna asked Waxer while she chowed down on one of the energy bars he had given her after she began to feel peckish. From his smile? Pretty well, Waxer said, as he finished a piece of her armor, having just gotten done with the painting of the claws on her pauldron. Well, now we can really get in some teasing, in case a clone with hazel eyes comes out one day. Same with the other lovebirds here. Waxer snorted, gesturing to Yui and Phil each painting each other's armor. Their pinkies intertwined once again, and then to Thorn and Itsuka currently carving in symbols on their pauldrons. Thorn's right and Itsuka's left while a can of cyan paint was next to them. Holy crap, they're using cyan? So? That just happens to be her favorite color. I mean, have you seen her costume during our training sessions? Setsuna said with a raised brow, not knowing why the two using her class president's favorite color on their armor was a big thing. Huh, that's a funny coincidence. Boyle scratched his head. What is? Setsuna said, smacking his shoulder. Well, the VOD came up with colors to mean various different things, and a few random scenarios too, Waxer explained as he then pointed at their choice of coloring. Cyan just so happens to be the color of romance and love, he said, to which Setsuna's face seemed a bit blank. Oh, I get it now, she said, putting her fist on top of her open palm. Those two lovebirds, then what does red, orange, blue, and green mean? Well, red stands for honoring a parent or leader. Orange indicates a lust for life, for freedom. Let's see. Green represents duty, and blue, reliability. Waxer trailed off with a soft smile. Realizing she may have hit a bit of a sensitive spot, she immediately bowed her head in apology, not wanting to bring up something that made her friends uncomfortable. Waxer waved her off, saying that it wasn't necessary, and that he was reminiscing the fact that Django was the one with the original idea for colors before explaining to her the others and their meanings. While the trio reconciled over the small bump, Yanagi was sitting with Tetsu and two clones, mostly to hang out and also help the two. So, you're telling me these two are Spectre and Phantom? Sounds a bit cliché, if you ask me, he said, to which the trio shrugged in unison, something that sent a shiver down his spine. So creepy. He thought over just how synchronized they were. They Yanagi began. Just Spectre answered. Love Phantom joined in, as they finished each other's sentences. The occult and horror movies. The three said in perfect sync. Please, stop that. It's freaking me out. Tetsu begged while the trio just went back to painting the clone's armor black with some silver, similar to the ghastly girl's hair, while adding red to their visors. Isn't it normal dash? For friends to dash? Be in sync? The trio asked the metallic boy, who started to emit cold sweat at this point. Not to this level. Please, just speak individually. Chill, bro. It's just our thing, Spectre said while bumping his shoulder gently with his fist. While the quartet did their thing, Rookie sat with Aerie, who was currently holding Mousy in her arms, while the younger clone painted his armor gray with light green patterns to resemble horns on it. Locke arrived with a dozen more clones, each of them having been painted in a mix of light green and yellow patterns that resembled the horns of a bovine on their chest plates and their helmets. This was the newly formed Horn Company, a group of clones handpicked by Locke to be Aerie's personal bodyguards at the request of Izuku, which had made him make sure he had only picked some of the best he could find of the lower and middle ranks. Now, you may question why he didn't pick any from the upper ranks. The answer is quite simple. They were in other important positions that required their presence, along with how they meant that more of their brothers needed to gain more experience. As it was, Aerie didn't leave UA that much anyway. She was still shy among crowds, barring the VOD and some of the members of Class 1A. The only time that she'd went anywhere was the mall, and considering the near-disastrous situation that occurred, it would be a while before they felt safe enough for her to head outside. Not to mention the recent message that they received. Fortunately, they'd recently gone with Kaminari's idea of having playdates, and were planning things out with his mother, Tsuyu's parents, and were trying to see if any others had siblings around her age that she could have fun with. For now, they had a playdate with Noshiko, Samidare, and Satsuki this Saturday. While they sat down to customize their armors even more, they noticed one of their brothers standing at a huge billboard with several pictures of pro heroes, members of the commission, and even some members of support companies, red threads and tacks keeping them in place and connecting them. Todoroki had, throughout this process, intermittently got up from where he was with Jet and joined the clone, the two discussing various theories while Jet was standing with a tub of popcorn. I'm telling you, man, it has to be it. Hawks is a tool of the commission. The clone at the billboard said, pointing at the current number 3 hero's picture accusingly. I'm not sure, but I will look over the evidence you've presented, Shoto replied to said clone. Now, as to my theory dash. If it's about Ori VOD being Beer's secret love child, then I have to say no again. He has none of his physical features. But slick, that just means that he took more after his mother, Shoto said, having a nearly offended look on his face. Todoroki, that's ridiculous. We've already explained this to you. Well, how else do you explain the super strength? It's not like All Might gave him his own quirk. That's even more ridiculous. Slick awkwardly laughed, though Todoroki didn't seem to notice anything odd about it. If we go back to the topic at hand, I'm just saying that if Lady Nagant eliminated the earlier president of the commission, then she most definitely had a damn good reason to do so. She was a respectable hero who wouldn't do things like that out of the blue. Slick cleared his throat, pointing at the picture of a beautiful woman with purple and pink hair. I don't know. A lot of heroes have gone off the deep end over the years. Just look at my old man, Todoroki deadpanned, slurping some cold soba that he had somehow acquired. That's fair. At this, even Jet had to say something that popped up in his mind. Have you ever thought about asking Nizu? Apparently she worked directly with him for a good year. About 2 years before her arrest. Slick said while holding his chin like Sherlock Holmes. Perhaps we should anyway. We should move on. Not gonna get anywhere here without more evidence. Right. Well, here's another one of mine. Detnerat has to secretly be associated with a terrorist organization. What? Jet asked in a deadpan tone that screamed disbelief. Well, why else would they give us crappy costumes that are blatantly littered with design flaws? I don't know. They could just have a chip on their shoulder. General incompetence? While the three discussed their crazy theories, Phil, Yui, Niner, and Bell were also making some customizations to each other's costumes. Currently, they were filling several pouches with all sorts of stuff, such as miniature thermal detonators and imploders, and blasters of the same size of all kinds, putting the square containers on a belt, before filling others with mini medical supplies, blaster clips, and all kinds of gadgets. You're going to be a walking armory with all of these, Kodai-san? Oh, sorry. Yui. Phil quickly corrected himself, calling her by her given name like she had told them to refer her by. Seems like it ran in the blood that Izuku, no matter the real or his clones, just couldn't help but be polite. Izuku softly traced over the design on Ochako's helmet once more, the pink standing out against the background. He idly noticed Ochako coming back and sitting next to him, still blushing, but she smiled back at him. If she scooted a bit to get nearer to him, well, he wasn't going to say anything. "I think we're just about done with yours," he said, a small blush adorning his cheeks, just like hers. "There's something I need to tell you about. Something the VOD haven't let me live down ever since we did it," he said as he looked down at her helmet in his hands. "Did what? And when?" the brunette asked, tilting her head. "When we bumped our helmets together before our internships and after." "Huh? Why do you suddenly bring that up?" "You see, we in the VOD have a name for when two individuals who are very close, but not in the family, although it can be, way, bumps their helmets together." He laughed awkwardly. "What's it called?" Ochako inquired, getting more and more curious by the second and slightly dreading the answer. "The Keldabe kiss," Izuku said, his words being barely above a whisper. The moment the words entered her ear canals, Ochako's brain began to try and process what he had just told her, and she fainted. "Ochako, get some ice packs. She's overheating." While some clones and students rushed to help Ochako, CC 3636 looked at the spectacle in slight amusement. "Ah, young love," 3636 chuckled, while Momo giggled at her friend's predicament, while also feeling immensely happy for the two. "Have you found a name yet?" Momo asked as she went over a line in her armor once more. "Nope, but I'll find something soon." "I hope so. I'd rather call you by something other than your number." It'll happen soon enough." And so they spent the rest of the day painting, until finally each costume was ready. "All right then, everybody. Looking good. Let's try these costumes on and see what they can do, all right?" "Yeah." Izuku's friends were excitedly bouncing around in their new costumes, and Ochako would be the first to try out her newest costume. Nearby, Aizawa and the other teachers were observing, the former glad to see his students well protected, while Hammer, commander of the engineering corps, Hatsum, and Powerloader presented the armor. "All right, Ochako, let's go." Ochako's costume consisted of her old bodysuit, including the collar and belt but slightly modified, and attached to it was a series of armor plates over her arms and legs, with plenty of space between her joints and keeping her flexibility. She had two pieces of armor on her torso, the chest plate with Izuku's Biscarrat Kar-T, and another a bit below to protect her abdomen. Some notable additions, however, was the wrist armor that she had that apparently served to help with her pressure points, a grappling hook, and something that protruded out of her left wrist with a bunch of holes. On her shoulders were pink pauldrons, with the left one bearing the same UA symbol as Izuku's. In fact, all of his friends bore that symbol, and on her head was a helmet that reminded her of a pilot's. The armor itself was an off-color white different from the VOD with a soft pink hue, a much darker and prominent pink being used for detailing. Fives ended up writing in Mandoe on her left breast plate the word Eliot. That combined with the heart would forever mark her as one of the VOD. "All right, Ochako, let's test things out. First things first, your armor comes with the standard wrist comm and helmet comm, and your belt now contains various supplies. Feel free to look them over later," Hammer said with a grin. "Right. On your right wrist, you'll notice the grappling hook. It's similar to what the VOD use, and has plenty of length for far targets. They'll be especially useful for when you're applying zero gravity on yourself." "Ooh," Ochako hummed in awe, just waiting to test it out. "And on your left wrist, and for the purpose of this training, filled with dummies, are a new invention designed by the VOD and created by Hatsum." "Yes, I know, but these do work," Powerloader said while raising a hand to halt her protests. "They're basically a set of miniature missiles. They'll fly out and target nearby enemies in case you find yourself surrounded. The VOD have taken to calling them whistling birds." "Whoa." You'll notice that your gauntlets, collar, and helmet have been further upgraded to stimulate the necessary pressure points to help you out. Speaking of said helmet, you'll find that it has a collapsible visor with a small heads-up display, or HUD, Hatsum excitedly explained. "And, as an added bonus, Your greaves are now much more compressed, and as an added gift from the VOD include thrusters to help with sharp changes in direction when you're floating. Ochako looked at her calves, which sported said thrusters. They're really nifty. Yep. Now, let's take this for a test drive. Hatsum said as Power Loader pressed a button on his wrist. The courtyard in front of them then changed, transforming into a small obstacle course. Alrighty then, let's give her a test run. Goal is simple. Just make it to the end and try out every piece of equipment you got. Right. 3, 2, 1, go. Ochako sprinted forward and started to leap over logs and other obstacles before seeing a wall and applying her quirk on herself. Quickly floating upward, she then launched her grappling hook to a post a good distance away and rocketed forward. Kicking with her legs to activate the thrusters, she launched forward even faster before releasing her quirk after passing the post. The grappling hook rewinding automatically as she fell into a roll and continued forward. Targets then popped out of the walls and floor, prompting her to thrust out her left arm, firing off the whistling birds that flew around a bit like small rockets guided by children, making their trajectory unpredictable until each of them impacted with a target, knocking them down. Holy Buddha! These are effective. How much does it cost to make these? She asked May. Only 10,000 yen per piece. Nothing much if you think about it. May grinned, causing Ochako to promptly crash into the wall when hearing the price of the micro-missiles and how much money she had just flushed down the toilet. While Ochako slowly slided down the wall, 3 blurs blitzed past the small group, 2 yellow, white and black blurs and 1 white, blue and gold, stopping a few meters from them, revealing itself to be an ARF trooper along with the newly introduced and promoted ARC Trooper Blitz. What do you think of your new armor, Denki? Tenya? Izuku asked his friends who took off their helmets, whose visors stopped glowing blue the moment they did so. Handles like a dream, Izuku. Denki grinned with a thumbs up. I concur. This new armor actually feels like it provides more than just aerodynamics. And without the added aesthetics, I feel even faster. Tenya replied while chopping the air. Plus these vambraces are awesome. I never thought I'd be able to carry around a medkit on my wrist. Denki marveled at the devices on his wrists. On his right was a grapple line that he could conduct his electricity through, and on his left was a collapsible pair of pads that he could use to make himself a walking aid. Dude, I can't even begin to thank you enough for helping me figure out this new way to use my quirk, Denki said as they paid attention to the special design on his greaves, with black running almost completely straight down except for slight protrusions, and inside they could see energy surging across it like a miniature lightning storm contained in his legs. Denki's costume was almost completely redesigned, wearing full armor that was semiconductive and painted black, yellow, and clone white. He had a comma, and his helmet had a new antenna and flashlight on each side, along with some sort of monstrous creature painted on his torso with its arm reaching towards the heart of iron on his chest towards his own heart. Also on his right shoulder was the Medcorps symbol in red as Denki had recently decided to start up his paramedic training again. Yep, we theorized that by charging yourself, you could affect your muscles, thereby affecting your speed and reaction time. Your greaves basically have electric channels that help direct that energy, giving you that boost, Izuku said as he walked over to Kaminari. We've also added plenty of fuses into your armor that will help you from short-circuiting yourself. It's awesome, Denki yelled before blitzing into a wall. Everybody cringed. Ow. Do not worry, Denki. I will help you get used to the speed, Tenya chimed in, helping the electric blonde up who took off his helmet to reveal a nasty bruise on his forehead, before he held a vambrace to his face and fired a Bacta spray, speeding up the healing process. This new fluid is a miracle. It has even helped Tensei so much in such a short time. Tenya marveled at the Bacta with a smile. Tenya's armor was very reminiscent of his older one in both coloring and style, especially around the legs. However, the plating was that of the VOD, and overall it was slimmer and more compact. His helmet had also gone through a redesign, having the thin, V-shaped visor, a knight-like face guard, and antennas similar to his old costume. A particular thing to notice was the special coloring. He had 2 orange vertical stripes along his chest plate on opposite ends, and on his forehead was a design specially commissioned by the VOD. A jag, a particular mark of honor bestowed on him by the VODE, not only for his courageous act at the USJ, but also his restraint against attacking Stain and Vengeance, a marking only a select few of the VODE had the privilege to bear. The Jag took the shape of a form of eyes, from a mysterious creature that Izuku seemingly had encountered at a young age, as the memory they had taken inspiration for the design from was extremely blurry, save for the eyes. Tenya himself, though, had insisted several times he didn't deserve this badge of honor, with only convincing from Waxer, Boyle, and Setsuna having made him accept the gift, as sometimes it took more courage to run to get help than stand and fight, especially if loyalty was one of your virtues.
Oi.
Legs. Time to test your gear. My name is Tenya Ida, the brunette said before putting his helmet back on and got into a running stance, before shooting off with several stationary security bots popping up and firing rubber bullets at him. Managing to dodge most of them, he felt a few hit his armor, before swinging his leg and destroying one, before extending one of his arms out, firing a repulsor wave, sending it flying backwards. Shortly afterwards, a pair of turrets dropped down, with the armored teen using the new device on his back, a jump pack, to give himself a boost upwards, before using his engines to keep himself steady for a short amount of time, while something popped up from his jetpack, a shoulder-mounted blaster. Firing the weapon, he hit both turrets before they could fire a single shot and landed somewhat gracefully after. Sweet. Looks like your repulsors are working, your jump pack is giving nominal readings, and your shoulder blaster is just fine. A robot popped up behind Tenya, and with a quick swipe, the sharp edge of his vambrace swiftly cut through it. And the vambraces are working just fine, May said with no small amount of cheer. Running diagnostics, she muttered as she looked through a tablet. Internal cooling systems look good. How you feeling, Legs? Sigh. I feel fine, your cooling systems are working wonders. That's good. Boom. The entire ground quaked as the fattest bass boost ever occurred next to them. Everybody then turned to a sheepish Kyoka who was extremely glad to be wearing her helmet right now.
Sigh.
Denki immediately burst out laughing, so much so that he fell back onto the ground. Kyoka's armor had the base white, but had a lot of black and purple scattered over her. She also had a comma like Denki, although hers was black with purple accents. Her helmet was also an ARF helmet with a scope mod, so that she could have visual advantages as well, base white with purple highlights, her signature red cheek marks, and, as an added gift from Denki, little music notes on the sides, as in, antennas the shape of music notes. She may or may not have blushed upon seeing them. She may have been the one who had painted lightning bolts on his Suher. Her vambraces actually had miniature sonic cannons attached to them, and she had speakers implanted into various parts of her armor. The system for figuring out which one to use was a bit complicated, but she'd figure them out with more training. However, as she now knew, it was not a good idea to send her heartbeat through all of them at the same time. Next to her, sparring with 3636, was Momo, and was loving her new costume. Thanks to some research from the support course, they discovered a third-year hero student who had troubles with his quirk, and as such had to create a hero costume entirely out of his own hair, which gave the idea of using Momo's hair for her body suit, which upon further testing, allowed objects that were created from her body to pass through. The science behind was extremely convoluted, but suffice to say that at the very least, she didn't have to be naked under the armor. All the hair needed did however also mean that she currently had a bob cut, rather than her ponytail. On another note, for the armor itself, they used a special type of magnetic underplating that would allow the armor to come off for creations and be quickly snapped back on. As such, the Biscaric Cartier had to be placed differently, the chest piece being one single unit instead of two, but painted to give the appearance with the heart proudly placed in the middle. Her helmet was clone white with black and maroon accents, although she kept it relatively simple like 30SIXS with a simple modification for her hair when it grew out again. He'd yet to find a design that he truly liked, and she wished to share it with him. One thing that was pretty cool, however, was that she also got whistling birds, and as an added bonus, they gave her the schematics for it. So yes, she could, as 36 said, send them in a basically infinite amount, as long as she had enough lipids. A small thing Momo had noticed, however, was how 3636 seemed to really like dogs, especially huskies. Hearing a few splashes, they saw Monk shoot out of the water, along with Tsuyu, both of them landing synchronized, with their fins retracting into their boots. "How's the suit, Tsu?" Izuku asked, just as the froggy girl took off her helmet, which gave off a small hiss as it depressurized. Once the headpiece was off, it was revealed she was currently wearing a balaclava to keep her hair in place. "It's perfect. Doesn't even feel like I'm wearing any armor when underwater." "Karo," she croaked, as she inspected her vambraces again. Other than the standard equipment, they also had a pair of mini-darts, a larger harpoon on both wrists with reels to help her get to somewhere even faster, or to help hang on to something in case she gets pulled by particularly strong currents. Her helmet, in fact her entire suit, came with all kinds of modifications for aquatic missions. Lights, sensors, and a special rebreather attached to her helmet, oxygen tanks that could be attached to her back for longer missions or rescue ops, along with an emergency filtration system that worked a bit like gills for a short period, retractable fins for better direction in the water, and miniature propellers for an extra boost attached to her legs. And obviously, to go with her theme, the armor had plenty of green, a color that Monk and the rest of the scuba squadron was copying from her, although each had a unique variation of blue and even neon colors to match different types of fish or even known oceanic locations. Next up was Shoto, who looked like his armor was made both for frigid and fiery situations, having what looked like the bottom of a trench coat, along with a one-piece helmet connecting to the armor like a hazmat suit, with the protective layer even being pressurized. It was colored in a mix of blue and red, with the chest plate remaining white. On each of his arms were vambraces, one a flamethrower and the other a cryogenic gun that would serve as backups. However, his palms had no undersuit, leaving the flesh exposed so he would be able to utilize his quirks properly. Jet had taken to wearing orange and brown armor, along with a comma that held his 2 DC-17s. The most noticeable difference about him, though, was his helmet, which looked like it had a set of inverted parabola on each side of his head. Waxer, Boyle, and Mayhem soon came running, just as someone crashed into the trio, making them look like a set of bowling pins. The one who had crashed into them was Setsuna, who groaned while missing several pieces of her armor. "Owie, Mayan. All of these pieces are difficult to keep track of," she groaned while sitting up, currently ignoring the pained groans of her 3 friends. "Sets, get your ass off of me," Boyle complained, trying to sit up from the pile he, Waxer, and Mayhem were in. At the comment, she put the clone into a headlock with one of her legs while looking at Izuku as her helmet retracted. "Sheesh, how do you run around in this all day? Feels like I'm constantly hauling around a radiator," she asked, just as the rest of the missing pieces arrived and attached themselves. "You'll get used to it, although what you just stated may be a problem, but it could also be a blessing in disguise. You're also semi-cold-blooded like Tsu, aren't you, Tokage-san?" "I am, yes, but I still feel like I'm sweating up a storm in this thing," she complained, with even a bit of steam coming out of her bodysuit as she tugged on the neck, ignoring Boyle tapping her leg to try and get her to stop choking him. "Trust me on this. You won't regret it being that warm once winter sets in." "Karo," Tsuyu said as she walked up to them. "Or Todoroki decides to create a glacier again." Setsuna thought about it for a few moments, before she felt someone poking her, and looked to see Waxer point to her leg, with the greenette noticing a passed out, foaming Boyle the moment she turned her head. "Oops," she laughed and let go of the unconscious clone, with Mayhem and Waxer beginning to drag him away. "Ayo, sister," Mina said and high-fived Setsuna just as she walked past the quartet and met up with the main group, Rex following close behind her and talking with Kirishima. Mina's armor was colorful to say the least, having retained the pattern and neon colors of her previous suit, which, despite having a camouflage shape, was all but concealing in any environment safe for a ball pit. Mina's helmet was something unique, though. Besides having 2 small holes at the top for her eyes, her visor was also just a singular slit, with the shape being rounder than the others and had small platforms on the middle. She had specifically requested a helmet like this, which had confused the engineering corps a bit, until she told her she used to skydive and also bungee jump, which at times could be pretty hazardous for the head in case something hit her. Her vambraces actually had additions so that she could show out her acid out of them, as seen by the small tubes running into her armor, with small suction cups connecting them to her skin underneath. Another feature of her armor and suit, too, was the fact that besides on the vambraces, there were microscopic holes in it that allowed her to secrete acid too, so she wouldn't just be limited to her hands. I feel so cool right now. Look at this. She giggled as she slid around the floor on weak acid secreted from her boots before she crashed into Denki and then into the wall. Sweat dropping at the sight, Setsuna decided to wave goodbye for now, as they began to shake their heads, just as they heard something fly through the air and reached out to grab the object, finding them to be blasters. Good catch, the quiet voice of Yui said to them while giving them a thumbs up, her other hand at one of her pouches where a few miniature blasters came out of the bottom and fell into her palm. Yui's costume honestly had the least amount of change color-wise. She had the same armor as a trooper but maintained her Ultraman aesthetic. She was pretty excited for the helmet, however, as so far hers was the most decorated out of all of the VOD. The headpiece was painted in silver, with the visor being a bright yellow, along with having a fin on top of it. Her vambraces were also colored in the same silver, but they were the ones who looked the plainest, with the only unique thing about them being a small crystal sticking out the front of her right one. "What's with the crystal?" Izuku asked, with Yui gesturing to them to follow her, as she began to walk towards the firing range where Phil, Niner, and Bell were practicing. The moment they arrived, the trio saluted Izuku, who returned the gesture, just as Yui planted her feet firmly in the ground as she found a target, before forming her arms like a cross, her vambraces rotating, with the right one clicking the crystal into place. Looking in curiosity, the group waited for a bit, just as a beam shot out of her left vambrace for a few seconds, followed by the sound of something like glass cracking and shattering, with the beam stopping soon afterwards. The target, however, had most of its upper torso obliterated. Izuku's and everyone else's eyes had nearly popped out of their sockets at the demonstration, but the freckled teen immediately noticed how the crystal shards fell to the ground the moment the Ravenet detached the vambraces from each other. Such power, yet each crystal can only fire once before cracking and shattering, correct? We actually got them from Melissa. We had an idea, and remembering about the focusing crystal she had, asked if we could use some, Phil said as Yui was actually bouncing around in excitement. It was an uncommon but endearing sight. Well, technically it was through the engineering core, but you get the point.
I'm Ultraman.
Yui cutely exclaimed, making her friends chuckle. It's designed as a last resort super move, due to how deadly it can be if used at close range. Fortunately, I had a good supply of wasted crystals that would have been disposed of otherwise, Melissa said as she walked up to observe them. Did you have anything to do with their costumes, Melissa? Izuku asked, and the blonde shook her head. I wish I did, but no. I merely provided some materials after I was contacted back on Island. That does beg the question, what are you doing here? Well, Daddy's still dealing with the fallout of iExpo, so I decided to come by and visit, Melissa said before looking over to her newest friend and inspiration. I've also been thinking about what you said, and I want to try. Oh. I've been corresponding with Principal Nizu and Powerloader. We're thinking about doing an apprenticeship under him. I already know a lot about support gear, but not so much about heroism. Who knows, maybe in a year or two, I'll be able to fight alongside you in the VOD, Melissa said with a soft smile. Izuku gave a slight nod in return, and he extended his hand. With a firm handshake, he quickly gave his support. Well, we'd certainly be honored to count you as one of us. Which reminds me, I do need to talk to Nizu about Isabi. See how she's doing. Izuku was cut off as he saw a ping in his helmet. Message from Nizu. I'm already on it, and she's doing fine. She's been watching you quite closely. On that note, check the news. It seems you're famous again. I feel that I should be worried by the fact that he already knew, but at this point, I don't care, Izuku muttered under his breath. Either way, if it means that Isabi is doing all right, it doesn't matter. Who's Isabi? Melissa asked. A quirkless girl I saved during my internship. She really wants to become a hero too, Izuku replied as they observed the others. How has the dark saber served you? Wonderfully, although I can't really spar anybody with it, unless I put it on the really low settings. Melissa hummed in acknowledgement before noticing someone else come up to them.
Ah, Yuga.
How's the armor treating you? Yuga smiled as he took off his helmet, His helmet still retained most of his knight design. However, the plating had obviously been replaced by clone armor. He kept the silver coloring, despite knowing what it meant for the VOD. Everybody assumed it was just because it was the shiniest of the materials available. I haven't felt any abdominal pain so far when it comes to my magnificent sparkling, mon ami. He chirped, sparkling as he struck a pose. Well, according to Hammer and RG, the new belt in your armor injects Bacta directly to your stomach. However, scans have also provided something interesting. It says your quirk isn't compatible with you, Izuku said, wondering why that was the case. I'll tell you what, there's a spy in our midst, Slick exclaimed, as he bursted into the room. All right, Slick, that's enough of that. Go on and head off, Izuku said while shooing him away. While Fox and Thorn dragged the protesting Slick away, Izuku turned back to half-French teen. My quirk is incompatible with me? Yuga asked in confusion. Yeah, sorry, I thought that RG already told you. Izuku bowed his head in apology. Actually, I thought you knew. Non mon ami, but I suspected, Yuga admitted with a certain resignation. Every time I used my quirk, every time that I was taken to my family's private doctor, they never told me the truth, you know? But I always suspected, after all. Why else would I constantly have to wear this belt? Ah, I'm sorry that you have to deal with this, Yuga. I wish there was a way we could fix it, but at least with this new addition, you'll be able to manage it. That's true, although quirk incompatibility is a rarer phenomenon nowadays, similar to quirklessness, treatments and support equipment have progressed amazingly, Melissa said with a comforting hand on his shoulder. Yet sadly, only a privileged few in a lot of places have access to them, Izuku said as he slumped, a slightly depressive aura beginning to emit from him while thinking back to a decade of hell. Gonk! Snapping out of his depressive state, Izuku, along with the others, looked to see what had made the strange sound, and found a boxy-looking robot walking towards them on two stubby legs, emitting the noise every now and then. What is that thing? Denki asked no one in particular. A GNK power droid, also known as a gonk droid due to the sound it makes, built by yours truly. May popped up, surprising everyone who hadn't even noticed her arrival. What are you doing out of bed? Melissa asked as she looked at the dreadlocked teen. Wasn't able to sleep anymore. Too excited. Plus it has been more than I usually sleep. 2 whole hours. A little more than a power nap. She grinned, before she started dragging off Melissa, who wondered just how this girl functioned. I'm ready though for our challenge. All right, I guess now's a better time than any, Melissa said as they headed over to the workshop. Powerloader graciously let her use his personal workstation, and Melissa was quick to set the terms. She did add one thing, however. As a show of camaraderie, let's make these inventions as gifts, one for the other, Melissa said kindly, with May become even more enthusiastic as her eyes began to zoom in and out from excitement. For the rest of the day, Izuku and his friends would pop by randomly to check up on the two and even stay for a bit, seeing their friends working hard on their projects. Powerloader was the most impressed. It was the longest he'd ever seen the lab not suffer through an explosion. At the end of the day, however, the two had finally finished their projects, Melissa having allowed them to use previous designs so as to not have to spend a week just designing something. All right then, guys, Melissa said with some cheer, although she was exhausted. It had been a while since she dedicated a full day to a project. Ready for the unveiling? The group excitedly cheered, and May was practically vibrating in excitement to unveil her creation. Well then, handsome, Powerloader began as he extended his hand out to the other girl. Since you are the challenger here, I find it only fitting that you start us off. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Shield, May said, surprising many since she didn't really do well with names. Must have a lot of respect for the Shield name. I present to you my greatest creation so far, she exclaimed as she removed the tarp over her creation. The Astromech. Said Astromech was a small droid, cylindrical in shape with 3 legs, white in color with blue and gray accents and a black visual receptor, and other features. Oh, the crowd exclaimed, clapping at the presentation. My biggest dream is to help humanity see the stars again. But ships need maintenance, so I thought up the Astromech. However, I also intended for them to potentially be personal companions if necessary for all kinds of engineering projects. She exclaimed proudly while putting her hand on top of the dome-shaped head of the droid. Is it just me? Or does that thing look a bit like one of those droids from my island? Kyuka asked, as she had less than stellar memories of those things. I made it with parts from it. Now, let's have my baby see the light of day. May cackled as she activated the astromech. A few seconds later, the small screens began to glow, with the robot looking around the room by turning its head. Hello, R2-D2. Welcome to the world. May whispered to it like it was a human baby that had just been born. The droid kept looking around as it chirped slightly, before rolling forward and circled the group, just before it stopped at Melissa. R2-D2? It came to me in a dream. That's what I knew I would call the first one. I don't know why. May trailed off before Powerloader took over. Next up, Shield Sand's invention. The teacher said, as Melissa bowed, before unveiling her creation. It was a humanoid robot in what looked like pure gold plating with a head containing two big eyes that looked slightly like small car lights and a small mouth, while the arms were supported by small struts that seemingly didn't allow them to stretch out completely. What is this? This is what I like to call the protocol droid. I know that with the VOD in play, other countries may soon want to seek diplomatic or military relations with Japan, but considering the language barrier and how difficult it is to learn each other's language, not to mention just worldwide, I decided I wanted to create something to help with that. This beauty right here currently knows over 100 languages alone. However, I also made this to be able to take care of people who can't take care of themselves properly, such as the elderly, by helping with menial labor and healthcare. I call this one C-3PO, she said as she activated it. The eyes soon started to glow as it looked around the room. Greetings, I am C-3PO, Human-Cyborg Relations, at your service, it said, just as it began to walk over to May. Mistress May, I must implore you to sleep more, take a bath and have a hearty meal. You look terrible right now. But my babies. Mistress May, a healthy body is a healthy mind. If you continue like this, you may lose your ability to think creatively. At this, she stopped dead in her tracks and thought for a few seconds. Someone please ask lunch. Rush to make some onigiri with tuna mayo. I'll be heading to the women's bath. She slumped. With pleasure, Powerloader said, as he rushed out of the support department to the cafeteria, while two clones decided to escort May, in case she tried to change her mind. Speaking of food, is anyone else feeling a bit peckish? I know I could certainly go for a cheeseburger. Denki chimed in, followed by the sound of a pair of stomachs growling, to which both he and Setsuna blushed. I sure could go for a bite. I'd love some mochi. Ochako, mochi is for dessert. Please. She gave a quick pout to Izuku. I sigh. Izuku could only sigh and shake his head before beckoning her to follow him and the others. Momo, Kyoka, and Tsu quickly slid up to Ochako with various grins. You certainly were quick to take advantage, huh? Ochako could only blush in reply and moved faster to walk next to Izuku. This is gonna be so fun to tease her with, eh? Setsuna added, as she walked up to join the 1A girls as they walked to the cafeteria. Finding a place to sit, they saw lunch rush in the kitchen with more silhouettes which were soon revealed to be clones. Aight, lads. What can I get for ya? A clone in an apron said as he walked to the table. You know me, Cookie, just the usual, Izuku said, to which the clone, or Cookie nodded and looked to the others. Spaghetti and tomato sauce with fresh basil, please. Dino nuggets. Cheeseburger with a side of fries. Same as him, but with some cinnamon rolls as dessert. Cold soba. A triple bacon burger with some cheese fries, if I may. Miso soup, rice, mackerel, and some jelly. Some beef stew would be nice. As the cooks began their orders, everybody sat down around a large table that had been set up. Truthfully, it was a bit odd to see the cafeteria so empty, but considering how it was summer break, it was to be expected. I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited for the camp next week. Denki smiled and looked at the table with his friends. Well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stay that long, but I'll make sure to keep in contact with you all. Melissa grinned sheepishly. After a short while, May returned just as the food was done and joined them at the table. She looked like an entirely different person now that her hair and face weren't dirty nor greasy with filth, oil, soot, and ash. It was actually pretty smooth and even supple looking. She did look slightly depressed though. My babies. A few chuckled at her expression, but the group continued to eat. Now remember guys, don't become too reliant on your gadgets and armor. Make sure to also balance it out with your quirk. Izuku lectured them and was about to put a piece of pork into his mouth before blocking Fordo's chopsticks. Right. I do wonder what the camp has in store for us though. Hopefully, nothing too bad. We go in and we come out stronger. On another note, I'd like to make an announcement. Tinya exclaimed as he stood up. As you all know, my hero name was simply Tinya, but after much deliberation, I've come up with a new name for myself. I am the Ivian hero, Cabber. Many clapped at the news with Izuku providing the translation. The Velocity hero, Guardian, that's wonderful, Tinya. Well, since you've announced yours, I'll say my own piece, Denki said as he also stood up. With everything that's happening, I wanted to make a change of my own, to honor my family and friends. I'm the son of the storm, Burinar. More clapping arose as Izuku translated the Mandoe. Though it was a bit funny seeing that storm was said twice, it was also sweet to see how high regard he held for his mother. To us for once getting a normal outing outside of school grounds? Ochako asked while raising her glass, followed by the others. Yes, and to us, friends and family, Izuku finished as they gave the toast. Cheers. To be continued. Author. Hi guys. Hope that you enjoyed this simple but heartwarming chapter. Again, thank you all for your support. Plus, now we have fan favorites. Also, what's this? An Izuku Midoriya who had friendship growing up is not only confident and willing to ask somebody out, but is, dare I say, charming? Who knew what a supportive life, even with constant abuse, could do that? Until next time, guys. Chapter 26, Calm Before the Storm. Warning, this chapter will contain blood and gore. Have fun. Legion. Calm Before the Storm. Adaptation is the key to survival. Some time ago. Summer Vacation Hero Special. From number 1 hero to UA high school teacher. This time, we will look back to All Might's work and his great. The TV turned off with a click. Hee, I figured it out. I know why Stain pissed me off so much, and why those brats irritate me too. All cause of All Might, always smiling without a care in the world, as if there was no one he couldn't save. But Mandalore, something's different about him. Shigaraki muttered. Tell me why hope? Why not peace? Why not make yourself the next All Might? Because this world doesn't need another All Might. It needs more. The people have grown too complacent and rely too much on him. When he inevitably has to retire, the world will be thrown into chaos. Their conversation at the mall still rang in his head to this day. His answer had been most surprising. For the boy to admit that the world didn't need another All Might, even though he'd been publicly seen next to him, and, if the rumors were true, All Might was even close to his family. A test. A test would have to be conducted. It's time we change that, Kurogyri. Prepare the Nomu and get me in contact with the ones that Sensei said he prepared for me. I have a job for them that they will find interesting. The crusty villain grinned before leaving the bar. Kurogyri nodded and continued cleaning the glasses. He would pass on the message soon enough. Sighing as he looked at the pictures left on the table, Kurogyri began to recall Midoriya Izuku, aka Mandalore's exploits. Midoriya Izuku. Quirkless until the age of 10, where it was revealed that he had a dormant quirk that produced sentient clones of himself. Said quirk evolving to include extreme strength, weapons, and now vehicles, Legion. After enrolling in UA in April of this year, he distinguished himself by summoning his army and destroying the USJ Nomu, finishing second place at the sports festival while simultaneously providing security with his clones and then single-handedly defeating the hero killer, Stain in combat. The latter would then save the former's life from our Nomu, declaring him a true hero. Kurogyri set down the glass and picked up another. Although they were all clean, the habit helped him process his thoughts. Then, a mere day after, he was involved in a confrontation that included the rescue of a civilian child, publicly proclaimed his intentions in a press conference to succeed All Might, and got a provisional license in a landslide victory against a multitude of other schools while ridiculously outnumbered. His eyes then narrowed as he recalled recent events, and most recently, at the I-Expo, fought All Might one-on-one on equal grounds before helping defeat the Wolfram's crew that took over the island. This may prove troublesome for the Master's plans in the future, unless he manages to convert him and his army to our cause, Kurogyri said to no one in particular, before he, in an unusual moment of mental exhaustion, poured himself a drink and downed it. He might still be a bit sour about how the boy had dented his collar so brutally. Just a bit. But there was one thing that was absolutely true. Midoriya Izuku and Shigaraki Tamura were polar opposites, yet there was more to them than meets the eye. And perhaps they were more similar than they cared to admit. And their battle would be legendary. Meanwhile, as Shigaraki walked down an alley, he muttered to himself, "I'll make it myself, a world without All Might. And I'll show everyone just how fragile that so-called justice is. Time will tell what you do next, Mandalore," he thought as he disappeared into the darkness. "Shigaraki Tamura has requested your assistance, as well as that of another associate of ours, Vorabiter. He has a special mission in mind." "What would you have me do, my master?" the cloaked figure rasped. "Help him with his mission, if you would be so kind, Tyazuki, but do be careful. I'd rather not lose an important asset." "I understand, my lord," Tyazuki said as he bowed before turning to leave. "That isn't to say, however, that you can't have some fun. While Tamura's targets aren't to be killed, I'm sure that you'll have plenty of fun against Mandalore." Tyazuki chuckled. "A chance against All Might's protege? He will live, that I assure you. But I will ensure that he will be broken before All Might." All for One chuckled. "Ah yes, what better way to fulfill a vendetta than to go for those they most care about? I do have one question, my master." "What is it, my loyal subject?" "What of his clones?" he asked, to which he heard his master chuckle. "Kill them all." "I expected nothing less from Sensei, no matter how much I looked into it. I couldn't find a single trace of where they're going," Shigaraki commented as he finished making a tower out of playing cards. "Indeed, UA has been tight-lipped about everything, and their little clone army is on constant patrol," Kurogyri added. "Good thing we had them on standby, no?" "I guess," Shigaraki muttered as the tower fell apart. A knock on the door and a puff of smoke brought their attention to Jiren, who was coming in to tell them that the equipment ordered would be ready in time. Although the work would be lackluster, the quality was guaranteed. "You know why they've decided to support you, Shigaraki?" "It's 'cause everybody has high expectations," Jiren began while taking a drag. "If the League of Villains becomes active, then those smoldering in the dark will start to move, and guys like me will profit again. Then it's time for us to really show them the true power of the League of Villains," Shigaraki began. "Don't worry, soon you won't be able to keep up." "I look forward to that," Jiren replied as he left the bar. Shigaraki grinned as he stared at the pile of cards on the bar. All the pieces and prey are reaching the same destination. "It's time to start the game," Shigaraki grinned sadistically. 1 week after the painting. Standing outside the parking lot, both classes 1A and 1B along with a company of the VOD were waiting for the teachers to arrive, while they in the meantime made time pass with small talk. "Man, I can't wait to get to the camp and get stronger," Denki exclaimed excitedly, while Blitz sat on the ground and read a book and Kyuka just nodded along with her electric blonde friend. "It will certainly be ideal for us to learn how to strengthen ourselves. Like Izuku said, we shouldn't end up relying too much on our new gear and armor," Momo added, having 3 clones stand with her, almost looking like bodyguards. The 3 in question were 3636, Sinker, and Boost. All 3 of them had maroon-colored patterns on their armor, similar to Momo's bodysuit, while 3636 had a unique-looking helmet with an antenna, along with a comma containing his pistol holsters. "Truer words have never been spoken, Momo. As heroes, it is important to never put one's strengths into one place," the bespectacled teen said, while chopping his arm. Says the one whose main shtick until recently was just running in a straight line and kicking people's teeth in. Mayhem added from behind him, to which Waxer, Boyle, and Setsuna guffawed while Tenya just looked at the ground in shame at his moment of hypocrisy. Now you four. Don't tease him too much in one go. Save some for the rest of the week. Itsuka giggled as she bumped her classmate's shoulder lightly while Thorn took off his helmet and looked to the sun with a smile. Thorn's new armor had the cyan shoulder pauldron on the left side and a small antenna, while the rest of it was painted in red on top of the standard white. His helmet had small wings painted onto it, courtesy of Itsuka, while also having a black sun visor and antenna along with most of the front being red. His leg armor was white down to the shins, where the rest of it had been painted red, while he also wore a black kama with red outlining, ending at his waist that also was painted in the aggressive color and having 2 pistol holsters on the kama. Yui, Phil, Niner, and Belle were all reading some superhero comics, ignoring the talk between the two classes. Phil had mostly painted some red lines on his armor with simple patterns, deciding to wear a completely black pauldron and kama, while his belt on the other hand was painted a maroon red along with his shoulder plates and a sun-esque symbol was on his chest. His holsters were of the same red color, along with his knee armor, while his shins were painted in a way that made it look like there was a harness on them. Niner had chosen to go with a scheme more akin to his namesake, with the kanji for 9 being painted on both his chest, shoulder, and knee pauldrons, while the number itself was painted onto each side of his helmet, one of them being inverted to make it look a bit like eyes, while a red stripe ran down the middle of it, along with his arms and legs. Bell, meanwhile, had painted one big bell over his heart, along with also having painted the sides of his helmet with them, while his shins and forearms were painted completely maroon, leaving his pauldrons and upper arms white. His thighs, however, had a pattern on it that looked like ropes tangling around them. While the two classes kept on mingling, Kan and Aizawa arrived, with the two instantly separating and standing in rows, awaiting their teacher's orders. "Why'd you stop mingling all of a sudden?" Aizawa asked, confusing both of the classes and some of the clones. "To make it easier for us to get into each class's buses, sensei?" Ojiro asked their tired teacher, who just shook his head and stepped back to let Kan do the talking. "We've decided to mix things up a bit as a bonding exercise. Half of 1A will join 1B in their bus and vice versa," he said, making several of the students gasp in both surprise and joy. "I will now list off the students who will get onto 1A's bus: Hananuki, Kodai, Kendo, Shishida, Tokage, Tetsu, Yanagi, Rin, Suburaba, Komori, and Tsunatori," Ken called out, to which the 10 students walked over to their sister class. "As for those who will go to 1B's bus: Todoroki, Bakugu, Sato, Hagakure, Azui, Koda, Shiro, Aoyama, Mineta, and Ojiro," Aizawa said tiredly, while said students made their way towards 1B, who greeted each other in a friendly manner, sans Bakugu, who didn't want anything to do with the extras, and Monoma, who complained about having to mingle with inferior students, while clones made sure Mineta didn't try to peek up the girls' skirts. At gunpoint. "Without further ado, get on the buses," Aizawa said, while the now mixed classes nodded and went to said vehicles, while most of the clones who primarily interacted with the students surprisingly got onto speeders, rather than in the buses with their friends. "Huh? Why are most of the clones separated from us, though?" Kaminari asked. "So far, the main reason for your interactions have been thanks to the VOD. This is an experiment to see if you get along just as well without them," Ken said as he stepped into his bus. "The clones will be using alternate routes to get to where we're going. To throw off any leads, we'll be leaving an hour after them, so feel free to talk and stuff while we get things underway." As most of the clones left, only a few stayed behind, mainly ones who hadn't interacted nearly as much with the other students as those who'd left. Amongst them were Droidbait, Cut Up, the clone who had been shot at Eye Island, now known as Bullseye, Heavy, Noble, along with 4 other clones none of them, Sanzazuku, had met before. Spartan, a quiet clone with a golden visor and olive green armor. Akama with 2 pistols and a backpack holding a new type of blaster. Orion, whom Izuku had explained was known for his compassion beneath his tougher exterior, whose armor was primarily red, with a glowing visor, blue leg armor and helmet, with the front of it being painted silver and having an antenna on each side. Sentinel was primarily a mix of red and gray, and also wore a kama, along with some type of cloak. The most noticeable about his gear, however, was the folded and sheathed staff with double vibroblades. He was unusually cold for one with the Midoriya genes, and seemed to have less qualms about inflicting pain on those he deemed to be less than scum, despite caring for his brothers wholeheartedly. The last one had no name yet, and was only known as 99. He had compassion that rivaled Orion's, but was a lot more open about it, being known for memorizing the names and numbers of all of his brothers, and according to Izuku, always helped around in the background and graveyard shift. His armor looked the plainest, with the only colors being a light shade of blue, covering everything except the helmet and hands, which were white, and his boots that were black. All four of these were ARC troopers, some of the most elite of the VOD. If the rumors about them were true, they were all survivors of the first generation of clones, along with being of the first 15 naturally born ARC troopers, whom of the first generation were 13 left, meaning even amongst their own brothers, they were legendary. All in all, the vibes they gave off were somewhat awe-inspiring, both because of their professionalism, yet heroic and compassionate hearts. Ochako recalled some of the words that Izuku had told her. The 13 are different from the rest. They absorb information at an unprecedented rate, and they adapt to training at an astronomical level, truly becoming some of the best fighters of the VOD. Even Aizawa-sensei was impressed by them. After the hour had passed, the buses started and they went on their way to the training camp. Tetsu, right? Izuku began as they settled into place. The boy was sitting next to Yanagi and was giving Izuku a wary look. Yeah, I just wanted to apologize for spiking you back then. You know, before the sports festival? He said, to which the steely teen nodded, squinting his eyes, before the greenet bowed, his head almost making contact with the floor. You didn't deserve that from me. Tetsu's eyes widened in shock, and he was almost frozen before an elbow from Yanagi made him respond. Look, dude, you don't need to bow like that. I accept, Tetsu stuttered. Plus, I was kinda being a jerk too, you know? It wasn't manly of me at all to accuse any of you like that when you all had just come out of a life or death situation. Izuku nodded as he got back up, the respect for him rising from those in 1B. Thank you, that's all I needed to say. For a while, they remained in their own conversations, but then Denki had to bring something up. Hey, Izuku? Have you seen the news lately? Sigh, yes, Denki. Reference news was apparently a bunch of articles based on the events of the I-Island Expo. The other students' identities had been kept secret, the news stating that I-Expo had been attacked and that All Might and Mandalore had saved the day together. While perhaps the others would be irked, especially Bakugo, considering the headaches that Izuku had been going through ever since his fight with Stain was publicized, they were glad for the continued anonymity, except Bakugo. However, even if they had been mentioned, their involvement would have been overshadowed by what everybody was really talking about. Mandalore being put through a deathmatch arena by Source Tormo, and then forced to fight All Might, and holding his own. Granted, the scales of power between them had been changed, but the news wasn't really big on getting all the details correctly. The world was in an uproar about the event, with many in Japan wanting the young hero in training to take All Might's place rather than Endeavor by the time the former had to retire in the hopefully not near future. The rest of the world, however, was in an upheaval for another reason: the VOD and their technology. America in particular had been interested, having attempted to send diplomats for contracts during the past week to discuss exchange in technology, both military and medical. They had of course been denied entry into school grounds, because having political figures in such an environment wasn't exactly for the best for both parties. Especially with Nizu involved. Izuku had more or less been hounded by mail sent to him, both physical and digital, and being the good boy he was, he had read through all of them. Most of it had ended up as fire starters for the Carmine. I'll deal with it a day at a time. As it is, I'm glad that I have Nizu in my corner. As it was, Nizu would only be able to officially protect him as long as he was a student, which was enough to deter foreign powers for now, many operating under the assumption that Mandalore would do an international tour like his, now public mentor, All Might, and they'd be able to speak with him then. Izuku was still on the fence about that, as cool as it would be, but his real worry was with domestic powers. The HPSC being the most obvious. Bah, he shouldn't think of that right now. He should be focusing on the now, and leave this to future Izuku. Looking around the bus, he noticed the atmosphere was slightly awkward, with the most active thing happening being Kirishima and Tetsu playing rock, paper, scissors. Looking at the guy in front of him, Hananuki, he decided to try and start a conversation. Nice to meet you, Midoriya Izuku, but you probably already knew that, he said sheepishly, while the lipless boy looked at him. Hananuki Juzo, I must say, you and your clones are something. Like, this is probably the first time in the history of that someone have ever risen through the ranks this fast. Oh, believe me, Izuku sighed. If I could have kept my fight with Stain secret, it'd be so much less of a hassle. Well, at least you're humble about it, and haven't let it go to your head like Monoma says, he replied and leaned back, which made Izuku groan, much to his amusement. Don't worry, we don't really listen to Monoma's ramblings. Kendo's been really big on supporting you, though, considering her new boyfriend. He chuckled. Thorn? Well, I do see them being near each other constantly. How has the rest of 1B, besides the girls, acclimated to my brothers being everywhere, though? Izuku inquired, hoping they didn't find it creepy or annoying seeing his face everywhere. I have met a few of them, and they're not bad people. The rest of my class has had varying interactions with them. I think no words need to be spoken about Tokage, he replied. Nope. Overall, a few of my class have gotten along better than others again. No words need be stated about Monoma. He's gotten in trouble with a particular one on a nearly daily basis. Slick, I think he called himself. Crazy guy. Ah, well, Slick is a bit eccentric. He's a conspiracy theorist, Izuku sighed, to which Hananuki nodded. I see. Personally, I feel like your brothers are a welcome addition to the faculty, Sir Midoriya. The voice of one Shishida Jirota rumbled as he sat with crossed arms. They have all been admirable company, especially the one called Keely. If one were to look up the word polite in the dictionary, they'd find his portrait. Said clone had been the very first to approach the beastly teen with absolutely no fear, having his own version of chivalry and a big interest in both zoology and mythology like himself, and had both studied it after school ever since. Smiling, he hoped he would be able to befriend the two on this trip, along with the others also hopefully strengthening the bonds between the two classes. Midoriya, it's shrooming to meet you again, Komori said from her seat and waved at him. Likewise, Komori-san, likewise, Izuku waved back at the girl whom he'd befriended during the sports festival. Truth be told, he sadly hadn't had much time to speak with either her or Shiozaki thanks to school and all the crazy events since that day, but now was as great a time to catch up as any other. Oh, I wish Shiozaki was here. She's actually been hanging around one of the Metaclones. What was his name? You mean Sir Kix? Lady Komori? Jirota asked, to which she nodded fervently. Yes, him. A shrooming guy. She smiled, before noticing Izuku had paled slightly. Yes, the apprentice of the White Mage, he said, looking a bit like his soul had left his body. What's wrong, Midoriya? I'm just afraid of how long it'll take before he starts to diagnose me with a new kind of stupid. A few snorted at the declaration, especially Izuku's friends. Kix had become a dedicated apprentice to Recovery Girl, and in keeping with military traditions, outranked even him as Mandalore when it came to medical issues. Did she really have to give him the cane, though? He griped, feeling like one cane-swinging medic was more than enough already. Looking around the bus again, he saw Kaminari talking with Tsuburaba about something to do with aerodynamics while Kyuka tried to piece together Pony's broken Japanese, before the latter said something that made the former look appalled, with the foreign exchange student giving the punk rock girl a confused expression. Is there a reason why she just called Kyuka that? Izuku asked, feeling like the tone Pony had used didn't fit with whatever could have offended his friend that much. What's wrong? Did I say something bad? Tsunatori asked in confusion. Yeah, you just called her a dash. Izuku then whispered into Tsunatori's ear what she'd accidentally called Kyuka. The poor girl then paled and started to apologize over and over again. I don't understand, Monoma said it was fine to say towards people of other classes. Pony trailed off before she became angry. I'm gonna skin his hide. Tellin' me to call people all them nasty words. Why I oughta dash. Izuku blinked at the curses that spilled out of the normally kind girl's mouth, while anyone who had a decent grasp at English jaws dropped. Just as the equestrian girl was about to go on another rant, the bus stopped, confusing the passengers, considering the drive should have taken longer if the camp was as remote as they said. "Everyone out of the bus," Aizawa ordered, to which the students complied and stepped outside, being greeted by a duo of people dressed in what looked like idol outfits with oversized paw gloves and cat ears. "We're taking a break? Awesome." Kaminari cheered as he cracked his back. "I wonder where the other bus is?" Momo wondered while scratching her chin. "This rest spot is kinda small, so I guess they went to another?" Hananuki reasoned while also wondering who the duo were. They did, however, seem familiar. "Hold up, aren't you? Lock on with these sparkling gazes." The brunette began. "Strikingly cute and cat-like." The blonde followed up. "Wild, wild pussycats." The duet, along with Izuku, exclaimed, or rather gushed in the latter's case. Several of the students now gasped and oohed at the name drop of the hero team the two were members of. Izuku, in a rare moment of his younger and more nervous self, stiffly walked up to the two, pulled a notebook out of nowhere and bowed while holding it out. "May I have your autographs, please? I'm a huge fan. Mandalay-san. Pixie Bob-san." He squeaked out. Chuckling, the two pros agreed and wrote down their signature on their pages in the analysis notebook, which they personally found impressive, if a bit creepy due to how comprehensive and accurate they were. "What a cute little kitten, might just take him for myself," Pixie Bob purred, before noticing the death glare a certain brunette was giving her. "Come on, isn't the age gap a bit too big for this?" Mandalay sighed, to which Pixie Bob shot her friend a glare. "I am eternally 18, and you know it." "Still not helping. Quit fooling around, you two, and get serious," Aizawa said, to which the two immediately stopped their friendly banter and looked at the students with an odd glint in their eyes. "Just so you guys know, we own this whole stretch of land here," Mandalay began as she extended her hand towards the forest. "You'll be staying at the foot of that mountain." "So far," Ochako exclaimed before pausing. "Wait, then why are we all the way over here?" "Guys, I've got a bad feeling about this," Izuku said as he felt a headache approaching. "Oh no." Momo groaned as the one of students got into different stances, almost as if preparing for something. They all knew about Izuku's supposed early warning system in the form of headaches. "Head back to the bus," one of the 1B students cried out. "It's 9:30, I'd say. You make it about noon?" Mandalay said with a sadistic grin. "Kiddies who don't make it, though, don't get to have lunch." "Move. Everybody brace," Izuku screamed out. A few of the students raced towards the bus, but were stopped by Pixie Bob. "Sorry, ladies and gentlemen," Aizawa began. "Summer camp starts now." The ground then exploded in front of them, and the cliff shuddered. What's going on? Tetsu's question turned into a scream, as the ground they stood on turned into a landslide, sending the students and a few unlucky clones plummeting off of the cliff. As they tumbled down, Pony fired off her horns and flew around the air, picking up as many as she could while Setsuna split her body into parts and grabbed Yanagi and Tokoyami. Those who didn't have the ability to fly, however, braced for impact with Tsuburaba creating a barrier of air and Hananuki beginning to soften the ground just as the mass of rocks and dirt impacted the ground, burying the majority of them. "All right, who's not dead? Sound off," Izuku asked after digging himself out of the dirt, followed by a chorus of groans and muffled curses. Some emerged, having been protected by Tsuburaba's barrier and had therefore suffered the least bruises, while those landing in Hananuki's patch of softened ground mostly had to deal with dirt and debris in their hair and clothes. Shortly after, most of the students and clones were assembled. They were, however, missing two. "Good to see you again, Fives," Ochako said, the latter nodding his head in greeting. "You too, Ochako. Droid bait? Heavy? Cut up? Echo? Fives? You guys good?"
Ugh.
"I'm good. I hate this place already." "Good here." "Hold up, has anyone seen Kirishima and Tetsu?" Momo asked in a panicked tone, to which they all began to dig through the dirt frantically, only to have the two pop out of the landslide like diglets. "We're alive," the duo shouted in unison. "Is Aizawa-sensei insane? We could have gotten seriously hurt," or even killed just now," Yui shouted, much to the surprise of everyone. "Hey!" They all heard and looked up to see Mandalay shouting down at them. "This place is private land, so you can use your quirks freely. You have 3 hours. Get to the facility on your own 2 feet. After getting through the Beast's Forest," she shouted out. "The Beast's Forest? Why that name?" Subiraba asked. "Why you don't think they keep dangerous or quirked animals here? Do you?" Komori squeaked out, beginning to shuffle around slightly. "Don't be silly, they wouldn't go that far, would they?" Itsuka said, sounding unsure of herself, and looked to her sister class for reassurance, only to have that small hope shot and sunk in mere seconds, when she saw how dead they looked inside. "We're doomed, aren't we?" she groaned, only to be met with silence. Due to the somber atmosphere, none of them noticed something rising out of the ground, only realizing it once they saw the shadow of it looming over them from behind. The moment they turned around, they saw a strange, eel-like creature, who immediately dived down and picked up Cut-Up in its mouth, who immediately began screaming his head off while the clones opened fire. Said creature then disappeared into the ground before making a beeline straight toward the facility. "What the hell was that?" Heavy exclaimed, due to how their blasters were ineffective. "Poor Cut-Up, he's definitely not going to like eels from now on." Echo said, "You just watched a brother die, and that's all you have to say?" Setsuna shrieked. "Relax, these things aren't real, look," Fives said as he pointed to the dirt that had been shot off the beast. "This means that we're dealing with Pixie Bob's quirk," Izuku said before nodding to himself. "Everybody, form up," Izuku ordered. His friends quickly closed ranks, though the 1B students were a bit slower. Just as they had gotten into a circle formation, earthen creatures bursted out of the greenery and leaped towards them, only to quickly get covered in mushrooms and crumble from an onslaught of attacks. "They said that if we didn't arrive before noon, we wouldn't get any lunch, correct?" Izuku asked, to which most of them nodded. "How can you think about food at a time like this?" "Don't worry. We can make it there in 45 minutes. "How?" "None of us, besides Ida-san, can run that fast on foot." "Who said we were going on foot?" Izuku grinned before turning to Denki. "Ah yeah, let's do this. Cover me, I need to focus." "Right." Izuku closed his eyes and extended his hand, a small green portal appearing. With more focus, he was able to expand it and summon what he needed. A trio of ADRTS and some speeder bikes. "All right, saddle up," Izuku gasped, slightly tired but still ready to go. He looked around and noticed that for the time being, the area was clear of monsters. "Who's gotten speeder training?" A few hands raised up. Surprisingly enough, Itsuka was one of them. "Thorn's been teaching me. Plus, I kinda love motorcycles," she sheepishly said. "Right, and who's gotten ADRT training?" Denki, obviously, was the first to raise his hand, with Momo and Kyoka being the other two. "Perfect, you 3, mount up on the ADRTs. Those of you with speeder training, take a speeder. The rest of you, ride as a passenger and use your quirks to provide cover fire," Izuku said before turning to Tinya. "Tinya, you and I will be covering the flanks with our speed, taking breaks by hanging onto the ADRTs. What about myself, Sir Midoriya? I am afraid that I do not have ranged capabilities, nor the speed to keep up with you all," Shishida as he slightly raised his hand. "Well, Shishida, I think it best that you ride on one of the ADRTs, and in the interest of class cooperation, you use one of these." Izuku grinned as he then summoned what looked like a quad-barreled cannon, attached to a backpack that made it look like it could be worn like a harness. Shishida's eyes widened in awe as he took the weapon in hand and put it on. "I admit, I very much like your ideas for class cooperation." A few of the students seemed a bit hesitant about getting onto the vehicles, but after some convincing by Itsuka, everyone was securely on a vehicle. "Before we go, may I put on some music?" Denki asked, confusing the rest. Izuku only chuckled in response. "You know what, Denki? Sure. But how are you going to get any? Technology wasn't allowed to be brought here." "Well, these things are probably an exception, but you know what I mean." Denki grinned as he gently nudged Kyuka, who grinned too and fished a small cassette out of her pocket, before finding an old cassette player and popped it inside, before pressing play. "Aizawa-sensei, let me bring it," she answered the unasked question. The silent forest was immediately broken by the sound of an electric guitar and drums in a tune that sounded like it was from the pre-Quirk 80s, with the students starting up their vehicles and moving out just as the lyrics began to be sung. Sometimes when your hopes has all been shattered, there's nowhere to turn. Earlier. They haven't moved yet, Pixie Bob commented as she readied up to send more beasts after them. "We might as well move out. Don't want them to get there before us." Aizawa commented as he went to the car after dismissing the bus. "What?" Mandalay asked in confusion. "Eraser, you okay? You do know that the 3-hour runtime is based on our team, right?" Aizawa merely raised a brow as he faced her. "Trust me, they'll be there." "What the heck? I'm losing track of them." Mandalay heard Pixie Bob cry out. After all, they have Midoriya with them. To most of them, it didn't sound like any song they'd heard before, but they still felt their heartbeats get slightly faster. Pony, however, knew exactly what song it was and was hit by a wave of nostalgia. You wonder how you keep going. Think about the things that really matter and the chances you've earned. The fire in your heart is growing. You can fly if you try leaving the past behind. Heaven only know what you might find.
Dare.
Just as the song reached its peak, they busted through a small collection of constructs and continued at high speeds. Dare to believe you can survive. You hold the future in your hand.
Dare.
Dare to keep all your dreams alive. It's time to take a stand. And you can win if you dare. As the song continued playing, smiles began to appear on several of the teenagers' faces, before Kinoko erupted into laughter at the adrenaline rush that the high speeds and blasting of constructs gave her, soon followed by others whose feelings were mutual to hers. "This is the beast." Tsuburaba laughed, with Rin letting out a loud cheer as he fired off his scales. "In America, how we race." Pony giggled as she surfed along them on her horns, before passing them while Tetsu and Kirishima were howling like wolves on the trip. What they didn't expect, however, was Momo of all people to join the two manly men, much to the shock of everyone, sans the heiress who was too caught in the moment to notice. Momo quickly caught herself and blushed, but it did nothing to help her situation, and the clones nearby could only laugh.
I'm totally telling 36. Momo.
Heavy snickered. "No, please, don't," she pleaded, somehow managing to steer the walker while clasping her hands together. "Too late for that, she-wolf." Droidbait grinned just as another construct showed up. This one was blasted by Shishida's cannon, who was also howling in excitement. "Let's go," he roared, his battle cry turning into something more of an animalistic cry. Freyrorgurg. The sheer speed they were going at made it so they quickly covered ground, with the constructs barely able to keep up with them while Heavy having a blast with shooting any of them getting too close with his favorite weapon. The Z6 rotary blaster, having oddly enough named his personal one Sasha. The group speared through the forest, dodging trees and monsters, speeders in the front while the Atartis, slower as they were, kept the rear guard. "This schedule of yours is pretty crazy, Aizawa," Mandalay commented as they waited at the facility. "It's become necessary. With the increasing villain activity and Midoriya's success during his license exam, we need to provide the same opportunity for the others so that they can use their quirks in emergency settings and learn how to defend themselves," Shota replied. "Are you sure they will be here before the other bus, though? That forest is pretty big, and my constructs will only make it harder for the kittens," Pixie Bob said in a flat tone, having a hard time believing the hobo-looking teacher. "I'll bet you 500 yen they'll be here within 5 minutes, he grumbled, to which she agreed. Just like he said, about 2 minutes later, music could be heard in the distance, before the entire group bursted out of the forest on their mounts, music blasting. What in the world are those things? Mandalay and Pixie Bob shrieked in unison upon seeing the unknown vehicles. Shota just held out his hand, to which the blonde groaned and flipped the coin to him while the classes dismounted. "Just a bit over an hour." "Impressive," Mandalay whistled while walking over to the machinery so she could inspect it. "What the hell? They beat our best record." She internally freaked out. Does this mean we get lunch? Denki asked, earning him a light smack to the head by Kyuka. Well, we did promise them. Come on, everyone, Mandalay said, just as two more people dressed like her and Pixie Bob arrived along with the bus they had initially been transported in. Ragdoll and Tiger, may I please have your autographs? Izuku asked as he walked over to the pros. The two blinked but then smiled at him and nodded. Ah, VOD, it seems like you've arrived before us, a warm voice called out, revealing itself to belong to 99, who walked over and pulled Izuku into a hug, who returned it. It's good to see you also arrive safe and sound, 99. Quick question though. Where's Cut Up? He asked and looked over at Aizawa and Pixie Bob. He's over there, 99 said as he pointed over to a table with his thumb. Cut Up had his helmet off and had a 1,000-yard stare, his armor dirted and covered in dust, mud, and branches. Cut Up? Kyoka asked as she approached him. When we get out of here, I'm going to eat so much eel until it's extinct, he muttered in a small mantra repeatedly. While everyone could only look at the traumatized clone in pity, Izuku noticed a small boy walking towards them. Hey, whose kid is that? He asked, wondering why someone who looked to be younger than Eri was here. 99 ended up approaching the kid to try and greet him. Hey kid, what's your name? Smack. Ow. Her. Both the kid and 99 groaned, the former due to hurting his hand when hitting the armor, and the latter due to the fact he had been hit in the scrotum, even as protected as it was from the armor. All in all, 99 soon collapsed, holding his hands over his groin. 99. Echo and Fives exclaimed in unison and ran to the aid of their older brother, helping him up from the ground while glaring daggers at the kid, who returned it tenfold, before stomping off. That's Koda. He's my nephew, Mandalay explained in a somber tone, the same type of somberness that Izuku recognized all too well. Thinking about what he knew about Feline Hero, he suddenly remembered an incident that happened about 2 years ago, where the hero duo Waterhose was brutally murdered by a villain. You're the cousin of Waterhose, aren't you? He asked, to which the pro-hero could only look down on the ground while fighting back tears. I'm so sorry, he said, with every clone within earshot also beginning to look at the ground, even Echo and Fives, who'd been mad at Koda mere minutes ago. You don't have to apologize. You didn't know. It's fine, she said with a small sniff, to which he shook his head. It's not fine. Trust me. We know. All of us, he answered, referring to all of his brothers, who began to take their helmets off one after the other. Mandalay blinked before recalling what Aizawa had told them about the VOD. They know firsthand what it's like to lose members of your family. They lost over 1,000 of their brothers in their very first battle. We lost so many brothers that day. But losing your parents? That's something that should never happen, Izuku said, as a cold determination filled his eyes. Before it became too tense, a new bus arrived, opening its doors to have some clones painted in a familiar lime green and some in aprons step out, followed by none other than Eri, who looked around curiously. See Sairai Ka? Izuku sputtered the moment he saw her, with the other clones and his friends reacting with different amounts of shock. Hello. What are you doing here? Ms. Inko told me getting some fresh air would be good for my health, and I already missed you. It's only been a few hours. I still missed you. She pouted, with some of the clones' face faulting. Sighing over how stupidly adorable her pouting was, he just knelt down and picked her up before looking at Locke, who just raised his hands in defense. Don't look at me. Can you say no to that face? He retorted before Izuku was even able to say something. No, Sai. It'll be good for her. I don't think she's ever been in the wilderness. Plus, it would benefit both her and Koda to have one around each other's age group. Who? The boy who hurt his hand punching 99 in the balls. He what? I know, but he's probably still grieving. Lost his parents to a villain. On that note, where is 99? Izuku looked up and blinked. It was a good question. Where did 99 go? 99 actually didn't go too far. After overhearing what was said about Koda, he couldn't help but feel worried for the kid. He, along with his brother Barb, who was also part of Horn Company, had decided to follow the kid to see if he was okay. hitting the armor with enough force that 99 could feel it probably wasn't good for his hand. Still though, where is this kid going? They eventually made it to a cliffside with a small cave, the kid overlooking the forest. 99 and Barb could hear the boy sniffling and clutching his hand. "Hey, kid," he called out and walked over with his brother. "Ah." Coda yelped and turned around, aiming his hand at them, to which the two clones held up their hands. "Whoa, whoa. Easy there, kid. We mean you no harm," Barb called out to him, with the black-haired kid's shocked expression quickly turning into a scowl. "What are you two bucketheads doing in my secret hideout?" he demanded of them. "Would you please lower your hand first? It's dangerous to point things at people." Fuming, Coda nonetheless lowered his hand. As long as these two bozos would go away after explaining their reasons for shadowing him. The two armored men then sat down and took off their helmets, revealing they were both similar to the other freckled teen with the other idiots who were trying to become heroes. "Triplets, all of you are idiots for throwing your lives away so recklessly," he huffed, not understanding why anyone would want to become a hero when they literally only met an early death on that path of life. "Triplets? No. You misunderstand. We're a lot more than just three." "What?" "We're clones, kid. Every one of us." "Oh, I knew that," Coda exclaimed with a small blush. "Sure you did, kid." Coda harumphed before wincing as his hand made a bad movement. "Hey, kid, let me see that hand." "Why? I don't need help." "I doubt that. You hit my armor with enough force to make me feel that punch, and I doubt that you know how to punch in the first place." 99 then gently grabbed Coda's wrist, the boy not really able to do much except wince in pain. "Easy there, kid, here. Let me wrap this around your hand. It's called Bacta. It'll fix you up faster than any other conventional medicines," the older clone said and let go of the boy, who immediately pulled back his wrist. Surprisingly, the clone was right, as he didn't feel nearly as much pain nor swelling any longer as he looked down on the patches on him. "Better?" "Yes. That's good. Now come on. I feel like your aunt is worried about you." This surprised Coda, as he didn't remember telling any of the newcomers about his relation to Mandalay. "How did you dash?" "I have good ears, kid. Now come on," 99 said, holding out a hand towards the young boy, who after a few seconds decided to head down, half running and leaving the two behind. "Kid's got spunk, I tell ya," Barb chuckled, as the duo began heading down. "Indeed he does, my brother. Indeed he does." Back at the camp, the wild pussycats were in the middle of cooking lunch for the two classes, when Pixie Bob heard someone clearing their throat. "Blondie, I've got a bone to pick with ya," the clone known as Cookie said, having crossed his arms as he looked up at the pro hero. "What is it, Cookie?" "You've done stuffed this place full of non-essentials. Look at all you've this. Cinnamon, oregano, cilantro. What in the cookie doodle is cilantro? And what is this?" he said while holding up a salad head. "That would be lettuce." "Lettuce? Lettuce?" "It's a vegetable, Cookie. The kittens need the 4 basic food groups. I've got your 4 basic food groups. Katsudon, mochi, hamburgers, and soba," the clone said, listing off the 4 dishes on one hand, making Pixie Bob's sweat drop. "Don't mind him. He's passionate about his food." Shredder chuckled as he cut some vegetables. "I must say, it is nice to have some help in the kitchen." Ragdoll chirped while Whisk helped her carry some pots and pans. "Well, all of us love to cook, and Lunch Rush is a great teacher." "Ooh, this smells wonderful." "Thank you. That's our personal miso soup. It was actually the first thing Lunch Rush Sensei taught us to cook during the sports festival." Turner grinned, stirring the pot gently. "Wow," Pixie Bob said as she gave a taste test. A dark aura then manifested around her, causing the clones to get a chill to go down their spines. "I don't know which one it'll be, but one of you will be mine," she purred and looked at the quartet with glints in her eyes, making them all hug each other and back into a corner. "All right, that's enough out of you," Mandalay said as she started to drag her out of the kitchen. "Are you boys going to be all right without us for a bit?" "Yes, ma'am." "All right then. Now what to do with you?" Mandalay muttered as Pixie Bob whined. "Sheesh, she's thirsty, yeah, big fella?" Shredder sighed while looking up at Tiger, who only chuckled and gently patted the shorter clone's hair affectionately. Sometime later, they would walk into the mess hall with trays full of food and place them onto the tables holding all of the students. The clones were currently placed elsewhere to eat, to continue the experiment with how the two classes mingled without the VOD.
Man,
This stuff's great. Suburaba smiled as he put a gyoza into his mouth, followed by a mouthful of rice. We'll eat till we burst, Kirishima and Tetsu said in unison, before one of them exclaimed they smelled beef. So, what do you think, Monoma? Pretty good for clone cooking, isn't it? Itsuka asked her blonde classmate, who begrudgingly agreed that the cooking corps had talent for their craft. After lunch had been finished, Aizawa and Ken gave the classes approximately 30 minutes to rest before their quirk training began. Once the time had passed, both classes stood at a training ground in their PE uniforms, before Aizawa asked Bakugo to throw a ball as hard as he could while using his quirk, just like during the start of their first semester. Complying with the order, the explosive teen threw the ball, followed by an explosion, only for their teacher to reveal that the throwing distance had barely changed at all. You may have gotten experience, but your quirks are practically still the same since the beginning of the year. Except for you, Midoriya, you're a monster, he deadpanned, to which chuckles were heard. Your quirks are a part of you, just like your muscles. When muscles break, they repair themselves and grow back stronger. So there's only one way to strengthen your quirks. You'll have to break yourselves, Ken said, just as the WWPC arrived with several different training devices. But don't break yourselves too much. Looking at you, problem child, Aizawa pointed out, with the sound of Monoma snorting being heard due to the nickname. Serves him right, the blonde whispered. Don't push your luck, asshat. Noble, who'd seemingly appeared out of thin air, sneered at the teen from behind, startling the blonde, who glared at the clone for the audacity. Noble. Enough, Aizawa scolded, with said clone just nodding in annoyance while the students went towards the devices they were assigned to. Ochako was put in a giant inflatable ball on top of the hill before being pushed down the bumpy terrain, making it roll and bounce. Denki was hooked onto a car battery, gradually sending stronger and stronger electrical currents through him. Kirishima and Tetsu were instructed to punch each other till they passed out, while Yui had to constantly shrink and grow objects to all sorts of different sizes. Ojiro was currently facing several clones at the same time, both to teach him more CQC, along with learning how to deal with being surrounded, while Hagakure were sneaking around with an empty bag to help Shuji strengthen his dupli arm's hearing and sight, while also avoiding clones wearing binoculars with infrared scanners who would be able to detect her thanks to her body heat. Bakugo was constantly dunking his hands into boiling water and letting out explosions to expand his sweat glands, and Shoto constantly freezing and melting the water in a barrel he was currently sitting in. The sounds of the explosions were, however, deafened by the roars and panicked screaming from one of the caves, where Tokoyami was trying to learn how to control Dark Shadow better, while the latter most likely were chasing after Korwaro inside, who was playing a very dangerous game of hide and seek. Setsuna was training her body to split into even smaller pieces, along with speeding up her regenerational abilities and building up her pain threshold, as Mina was melting smaller parts of her along with the cliffside, her hands beginning to swell from exposure to acid. Next to her were Kyoka, San, and Itsuka, each of them thrusting their earlobes, fingers, and hands towards the cliffside to harden them, and Pony trying to split off more and more horns, along with Mineta constantly picking the grapes from his head while his scalp bled. Zero, meanwhile, kept on creating tape, screaming all the while as Kamakiri cut the endless stream of the adhesive material into smaller and smaller pieces from the ground, while simultaneously creating multiple blades. Tenya zoomed past the groups, all while being harassed by jetpack troopers firing low-power blaster bolts at him, to both increase his speed and help him learn how to dodge better, with Shishida hot on his tail, who tried to control himself better in his beast mode. Izuku zoomed from tree to tree, using One for All. Beskergam, along with constantly pulling out small things such as ration bars out of the mindscape, along with a few bigger objects such as armor pieces and even speeders. Suburaba kept on breathing in and out, both to strengthen his lungs and air constructs, along with Koda, who screamed into the air so his vocal cords got stronger. Komori and Shiozaki were working on their plant creation and manipulation, Komori spawning mushrooms in drier conditions. Shiozaki kept on making vines, despite having not gotten any water ever since they began. Sato and Momo were currently consuming a ridiculous amount of sugar and calories, all while lifting weights and creating matryoshka dolls while Bondo was shooting off glue into the distance, despite the fact he'd begun to get facial cramps some time ago, and Shota sent bigger and bigger objects flying with twin impact. Aoyama fired off his quirk again and again, ignoring the abdominal pain to the best of his ability, Rin being right next to him firing off scales despite the blood dripping off of his arms. Awaze was also fighting against a group of clones, each of them firing stun rounds to make him better at dodging and getting closer to them so he could use his quirk to weld them together. Reiko sat on top of a rock, meditating while smaller and larger rocks were floating in the air around her, along with one unfortunate clone whose armor had been caught by her quirk. During all of this intense training, Izuku had stopped in the forest, trying to catch his breath while also focusing on trying to summon something from the mindscape by closing his eyes and imagining it. A few minutes of doing this later, he finally reached out to it and opened a portal bigger than usual, feeling the strain course through his body as he pulled out what he wanted to. Something new, unlocked for my island. After opening his eyes and looking at what he had summoned, he grinned to himself as he looked it up and down, letting out a small cheer for himself before speeding off again. That is so cool. I've got to show the VOD. A bit later, the VOD were honestly dumbfounded. Well, it's certainly big, but does it work? Who cares if it works? I'm calling dibs. Oddball said giddily like a kid in a candy store. You do realize this may not even work, right? So what? I'll test it out. Just so you know, you're going to bone crusher if you get hurt. Do.
Ikare. No, Oddball.
Can you summon more? 'Cause I gotta ask, what are we even gonna do with cannons that size? And look at all those guns. If we get it to work though, it can certainly fit a good amount of people too, perfect for carrying troops or even civilians. One of them then knocked their hand against the hard shell. Looks like it's got some good armor too. It'll definitely withstand a wallop. This thing's basically a tank. I think we could even put an ADRT or BRC speeder in here if we try. Orivioti, I could kiss you. I called dibs on one of the turrets. Bullseye exclaimed as he hugged the giant thing like it was a birthday present. Haruia. Nothing makes a tired and sore body relax more than a warm bath. Izuku sighed as he let himself sink deeper and deeper into the onsen hot spring after the day of hellish training. You said it, bro. Kirishima and Tetsutisu said in unison, having an arm around each other's neck. The best thing about hot springs is spoiled by this stupid wall, though. Mineta complained as he leaned against it. Get away from there, Sir Mineta, Shishida said, followed by Ida, who was chopping his arm. Faye, each of you wanna losers are creeps. I bet all of you are no better than Bulgackled. Before Monoma managed to finish his insult, Awaze dunked his head into the water. Shush you. It's not like our class is any better when it comes to girls. I've especially seen you eyeing Big Sis Kendo before, despite how she's taken. You guys are all wimps. If none of you have the balls to get a peek into heaven, then fine by me. I'm going. The pervert shouted, before beginning to climb the wall with his quirk, getting higher and higher only to be met by the barrel of an all-too-familiar set blasters. Trying to spy on the girls again. Are we? A clone said as he uncloaked along with a few others. The diminutive pervert had nothing to say. Maybe learn how to be a decent human being before trying to become a hero. The clone spat, before pistol whipping Mineta down the wall. Ah, good old perv swatter, he said as he affectionately patted the gun. Argh, you hypocrites. Mineta cried out while clutching his forehead as he fell down. Nah, we ain't hypocrites, the clone said before tapping his helmet. Visual scramblers that we installed into our helmets just for this occasion means that we can't see anything besides their heads, he said, just as Mineta hit the ground with an audible thud. They even tested it themselves before letting us up here. Then how'd you know I was coming up? Mineta cried. You were literally screaming on the way up, the clone deadpanned, with the others nodding. Thank you, boys. We owe you one. Mina grinned along with Setsuna, while the clones up on the wall just gave them a thumbs up. Still looking good, Sets. Waxer and Boyle said, just to ire Minetta even more. Liars. Nah, we just messing with you. Or are we? Minetta was frothing at the mouth before having enough and tossing a nearby wooden tub. Said tub hit Waxer square in the face, causing him to fall down, right into the girl's side of the bath with a splash, his legs sticking straight out. Blarg. Waxer popped out of the water with another splash before coughing out the water that he'd swallowed. And yes, it burned. As good as the helmet's filters were, it wasn't a scuba set. Finally forced to remove the helmet, he leaned against the edge and coughed out the rest of the water. Waxer, you all right, man? He heard Set ask. He simply raised his hand as he continued coughing and felt a hand tap him on the back.
Infine.
Waxer said, making sure to keep his eyes closed. You mind passing me my helmet? He asked as he palmed the edge. Sure thing. The familiar weight was soon on him, although the inside was wet. Great. It's gonna be a pain drying this out. All right, I'm gonna Waxer said as he opened his eyes. Something wrong, Waxer? Ochako asked in a worried tone, as she noticed some blood dripping into the water from beneath the helmet. Yeah, my scrambler's busted. I have my eyes closed, but just to be safe, I'd like for everybody to go neck deep, all right? Sure thing. Thanks for telling us, Kyuka said, patting him on the shoulder before doing so. Hearing a few splashes, Waxer then received the go-ahead and left their side of the onsen to go dry off and stop his current nosebleed, never once turning around. Was he a hot-blooded young boy in an onsen with beautiful girls? Yes, but he, like Izuku and every single member of the VOD, refused to ever do anything that would betray the trust of their friends. So he would not turn. Waxer, you lucky bastard. He heard Minetta cry out, most likely crying tears of blood. Hey, whose fault is it that I ended up here in the first place? That shut him up. Back on the boys' side, they reacted with various degrees of disgust towards Minetta and jealousy towards Waxer. Monoma was trying to complain again, however, much to the surprise of no one. Back inside of the sleeping quarters, the boys were sitting in a circle and listening to Izuku telling the story about his fight with Stain and how he escaped with Eri before ending it on the exam. Although it had been thought of, none of them had brought up him talking about the USJ. Even Monoma, as much as he wanted to, was persuaded, Reed threatened, to not mention it. And once we got back, I found my name on the list and I got my license, Izuku finished.
Man, Midoriya.
You really are something else. And your clones are natural charmers. I must admit, I'm kinda jealous, Suburaba said, all in good humor. Scratching the back of his head sheepishly, he apologized for his brothers snagging most of the girls in their class already. You're good with a sword, yes? Kamakiri asked, to which Izuku nodded. Then I would like to fight you tomorrow during training. Blade against blade, green against green. The insectoid team challenged. I would like that, but unfortunately the only blade I have that doesn't break from my strength is the Darksaber, and that thing can cut through metals like Swiss cheese. No. I meant just to improve on form and having to fight with a blade in case it's too destructive to use your quirk or that fancy laser sword. Kamakiri waved his hand. Then yeah. I'd love to. Ready, Hikage? Always, Izuku. The two greenies grasped each other's wrists, a new bond being formed, much to the chagrin of Monoma, who lamented another one of theirs had fallen, only to be pelted with pillows, which then ensued a pillow fight. Meanwhile, at the girls' side, Sue, time for some tea. How's the summer romance blooming? Mina asked, followed by Toru nodding fervorously, if the movement of her shirt was anything to go by. Me and Thorn are going strong, if that wasn't obvious. Itsuka said sheepishly with a small blush. We haven't exactly kissed yet, but we're getting there, the redhead giggled, hugging a pillow. Please, Izuku told me about your Keldabe, Ochako deadpanned. My what? Itsuka asked in confusion. Oh, you don't know? That helmet tap thing they do, it's called a Keldabe kiss. The girls were then treated to the sight of Itsuka Kendo absolutely flushing in surprise and shock. That idiot. She buried her face in her pillow, but they could all tell the fondness in her voice was all there. Anyone else who want to spill something? Kayukakea? Mina asked, before leaning in and whispering the punk rock girl's name in said person's ear, followed by a gentle blow of air, making her jump. "What do you want, Mina?" She glared while gently massaging her ear from the surprise. "We all know something is blooming between you and a certain paramedic in training. Bruh, you have no evidence." Kyoka deadpanned, before being hit by a stream of facts by Mina, nearly blowing her away. "Anything between you and 36, Momo?"
No.
"I admit, he's kind and he's handsome, but we see each other more like siblings than anything else. He's quite like the older brother I never had," she smiled fondly. The girls could tell she was imagining the two as adopted siblings in the Yayarozu estate. "Oh, is this why the group hanging around you is called Mo's Bros?" Toru asked, making the heiress flush before grasping the invisible girl by the collar of her shirt. "Who told you that name?" she hissed, pulling the other girl close enough to the point where their noses were pressing against each other. "Everyone knows it," she chirped, much to her horror. "That's so sweet, though. You've basically got an entire company of brothers following you around." "Sheesh, then imagine Ochako, BTW. You have yet to tell me what happened between you and Izu."
Mina skvea led.
"I have no idea what you're talking about." Ochako obviously lied, but smirked smugly. Seems like she wanted to play a bit. "Oh, you want to play it like that, girl? Well then, let's play." She smirked as she cracked her neck. "We saw you standing on the balcony yesterday. You were handed something, and when you returned, you looked like a tomato." Tomatoes." Yui drooled, a small trail of saliva running from the corner of her mouth, before her eyes fell on Ochako. "Looks like someone's hungry, and you seem like you're on her menu." Mina giggled, with Ochako inching away, before being held in place by Kyuka. "Kyoka? Sorry, sister, but you gotta spill the beans on this one." "Make me. I'll buy you mochi for an entire year," Momo said flatly. "Deal." She instantly surrendered. "Now, what happened? If he did something bad, I'll melt his hair off." Mina said. Hee hee. "Well, sorta, kinda. Maybe, perhaps, asked me on a date?" At the announcement, everything in the room fell silent enough that you'd be able to hear a feather hit the floor. Before long, however, it was filled with excited squeals as most of the girls hugged her and congratulated the brunette, who in turn nearly got squished. She managed to escape her fate due to her embarrassment, which caused her to use her quirk on herself and start floating around. "Now, eeny, meeny, miny, you," Mina said, and put Kyuka in a headlock. "Don't think you can escape from this," she told the petite girl, struggling to get out of her grip before the others grabbed her limbs. "Spill the tea." "Never." "Come on, Kyoka. 1 minute you're barely tolerating his presence, the next you're airlifted off the island, and suddenly you're latching onto him. I am not latching onto him. Like, please sister, do us all a favor and stop denying it. You even got the same helmet as him." "Oh right, I forgot. Didn't Denki paint little music notes on your helmet? Along with those small antennas that look like music notes? And if my memory serves me correct, you painted small lighting bolts on his," Itsuka said, smirking at the girl. "So I helped him paint a bit. That doesn't mean I like him, nor his stupid golden eyes, dumbass haircut, or sense of humor. Keep telling yourself that, you tsundere." Practically all the girls said in unison. "Well, what do you expect me to say after he saved my life?" And almost dashed Kyoka, then slapped her hand over her mouth as she almost said what happened at Island. "And that's all we needed to hear."
Mina kackled.
"Oh yeah? Well, you've been even clingier towards Rex." Kyuka retorted. "Naya, we're just friends." She tried to wave off. "You're lying." "I am not. Your horns say otherwise. They wriggle every time you lie." Gasp. "They do?" Mina cried out as she flushed and held them in place. "Nah, but you just got caught in 4K, Mina," Kyoka snarked. Did you just meme, Kyuka?" Toru chuckled. "Kaminari really has rubbed off on you." "Kinky," Yui said. "Not like that, you horn dog." Toru and Itsuka said, karate chopping the ravinet on top of the head. "Harder." "Stop that. I'm surprised you haven't pulled Phil into a corner and made out with him yet." "Girl, had this been a university, I'd have done a lot more." Stop this debauchery this instant. It's inappropriate for us to have this kind of talk, Ibera exclaimed, finally not being able to take it any longer. How scandalous. Oh please, Ibera, Itsuka grinned, making the holy girl suddenly pale. Don't think that I haven't seen you sneak off, in the middle of class mind you, to go to the infirmary to see that one metaclone. What? The 1B girls cried out before unanimously turning toward her. You hypocrite. You told us you were having allergy issues due to your quirk and the season. I'd like to meet Mr. Allergies. No, remember. She told us that she was getting her daily dose of medicine, or should I say Metacloblurg. It's not like that, Kodawai. The resident Christian screeched, as she started to wrap her vines around the girl's neck and mouth to shut her up. It is always those who seem the most innocent who's the most dirty-minded. Karo, Suyu said, before feeling a chill as Ibera turned towards her, face concealed by a shadow and eyes glowing white while her hair writhed around. Yui being in the middle of it all, making the holy girl look more like a gorgon than anything else. I'll be good. It's Kix, BTW. Pony whispered in English. I see. Momo smiled. Wait, what about Tokage? There must be something with her. Ibera desperately tried to deflect the attention away from herself. I think she's asleep. She hasn't moved for like 5 minutes? Turu said, waving an arm in front of the reptilian girl. Nonsense. Her eyes are wide open. Technically, some reptiles can sleep with their eyes open, Momo informed. Try poking her, Kyuka. Why me? You always poke Denki with them. Or are they only reserved for him, Gaia? Mina tried to tease, only to get jabbed in the eye like the punk rock girl often did with Denki.
Fine.
I'll do it. Gosh. She huffed, before poking the greenette a couple of times, with the other girl not responding. That explains why she's so quiet during class. Itsuka narrowed her eyes. Shall we draw on her? Yes. The next morning, both of the glasses were woken up by their teachers and told to dress in their PE uniforms for more training, with most of them being groggy and slightly sore from yesterday. Most of them were trying to contain their laughter due to all of the different drawings Setsuna had on her face though. A few of the students noticed how some of the VODE seemed particularly excited, with Tinya deciding to ask about it. Bullseye. What's got all of you so excited? He asked the clone with a crosshair painted onto the front of his helmet around the blaster hole from when he had been shot back at Eye Island. Sorry VOD Ida, but it's a secret and you know what people say about secrets, he said before running off again. Understandable. Tinya muttered, worried about just what could have made the trigger-happy clone this excited. Time to go through hell again. Oh boy, Tsuburaba muttered, before both their teachers rounded them up. Today's training will be slightly different. We will train your quirks, but in much more hostile environments than yesterday, Aizawa said, gaining his signature smile which at this point made everyone shudder. First, Tsuburaba, please step into this box, he said, referring to a sizable glass box with tiny holes in it. The brown-haired boy nervously complied, before the door was shut behind him. Your training for today will be strengthening your lungs in an environment with a constantly decreasing amount of air. As you can see, the holes are small, meaning that you won't have a lot of air after some time, meaning that your constructs will get weaker. This is a box to train both your lungs to utilize as much oxygen as possible, while also making you able to make strong barriers with minimal air, the tired teacher explained, with the students looking both intrigued and rightfully scared. Now, get to your assigned areas. Ken barked, with the classes scattering all around the training grounds. Reiko sighed as she went back to meditating on her rock and began to lift all of the objects she did yesterday, when suddenly she was interrupted by an air horn being blown near her ear, causing her to yelp and turn off her quirk before looking at who had done it. Phantom, what is the meaning of this? She asked her friend in annoyance. Part of your training. Your new regimen requires you to be able to keep your concentration at all times, no matter what. Therefore, Spectre and I have gotten the task of blowing air horns close to you at random intervals. Looking at him for half a minute, she sighed and went back to meditating and levitating objects around her, only to once more be interrupted by the air horn. Don't mind us, just go back to Woa, Phantom said, before he was lifted off of the ground by Reiko's quirk and began to spin in a circle. He, the world, around dash. He began to sing while the others chuckled. This was but one of the many examples of the clones interacting well with the students, each student getting at least one clone near them. Or in Bakugo's case, somewhat near them. And in the case of another, "Look, clone, I will only tolerate this for the duration of this training. After that, you and I go our separate ways," Monoma growled before getting back to his training. "I told you, I have a name, it's Dash. I do not care, clone. So let's just get this over with, and you can go back to your glory hog of a progenitor." Noble growled and clenched his fist but refused to react. If Monoma wanted to be like this, fine. He'd extended the olive branch, so he'd done his part. He wouldn't stick his head out for him anymore, even if he begged for it. Dollar hashtag percent, hashtag percent, caret, dollar, hashtag dollar. Acting like he's the best thing since sliced bread, flippin' dumbass. He muttered more curses to himself while following the brat around, fighting the urge to shoot him. Elsewhere, a few students had taken to forming a circle around Izuku and Kamakiri, the former holding a sword, courtesy of Momo, while the latter had his quirk out. Remember, gentlemen, this fight is only for training and improvement. Do not kill nor injure each other too much. Is that clear? Sentinel called out to the two, who nodded and got into their respective stances. "Ready, fight," the ARC trooper shouted, bringing his arm down and stepping back as the began. Kamakiri was the first to charge, his blades grinding against Izuku's, the latter taking a step back to gain some distance before making a tight dodge of another blade. "Maintain your focus, Izuku." "Right." Izuku took deep and calm breaths to keep himself centered as he allowed himself to delve deeper into One for All. It was something that he'd been working on recently. Instead of increasing the amount of his quirk available, he wanted to try increasing the depth of it. It required a lot more concentration, but he'd found that by doing so, the energy output at something even at 5% was a lot different. Whereas it did seem to sacrifice speed, and also eliminated the light show, it did help increase his connection to Hikage and his perception and reaction times. "Come on, you two. More form. You call this swordplay? This is nothing but amateur hour." Sentinel guided from the sidelines, sounding more like a drill instructor than a judge. Izuku was honestly barely paying attention, completely focused on his opponent at hand and the feeling of One for All expanding beneath his skin. He's fast, but he's sloppy. Relying on his quick tactics and amazing bursts of speed to win his fights, Izuku thought as he dodged another blow before quickly deflecting a bladed heel, throwing Kamakiri off balance. "You're good, Midoriya. Now this is what I call a fun duel," Kamakiri complimented, before charging again and swung his blades at him. Blocking another attack, Izuku felt being pushed backwards, but quickly gained his footing again. Swinging the blade at his opponent, Izuku felt it clash against the protrusions of Kamakiri, with the two even staring into each other's eyes briefly, before pushing away again. "Come on, Kamakiri. Show this bozo why 1B is infinitely better than 1A, Monoma shouted, which broke the insectoid boy out of his zone and made him look at his blonde classmate. That was all the distraction Izuku needed, as he swept the other boy's legs away from under him with a swift kick, and pointed his blade at his neck the moment he hit the ground. "Damn it, Monoma. Do you yield?" he asked Kamakiri, who nodded after coming out of the shock, before he smiled and offered his hand to the down boy who took it. Monoma, of course, booed, with Noble looking like he was just about ready to snap the neck of the other kid, before Kendo beat him to hit by karate chopping Monoma. As the students continued to do their training, one boy looked at them with scorn. "Stupid teenagers. Why would anybody want to be a hero?" Kota scoffed before heading up the mountain. A pair of curious red eyes looked after him before following, and a few clones, seeing that, followed right after. Kota huffed as he sat by the edge of the cliff face before hearing footsteps approach him. "I told you clones that I don't want to." Kota cut himself off as he saw that it wasn't a clone, but rather the girl that appeared earlier. Said girl slightly tilted her head, her crimson eyes seemingly peering into his soul. "Who are you?"
"I'm Mary."
"Kota. Why are you in my secret base? I saw you. You were angry, why? 'Cause I hate heroes. And villains. And quirks. They're so stupid. If it weren't for quirks, there wouldn't be villains. And if there weren't villains, there wouldn't be heroes and my parents. Kota cut himself off as he tried not to cry in front of the girl who was now looking at him with sad eyes. I think I understand. You do. I don't know my parents before I was saved. Eri shuddered and didn't say more, Kota content with what he'd heard so far. Why, you don't have to tell me more if you don't want to. Eri stayed silent for a moment before sighing. I don't remember much. I don't like to remember. But Izuka saved me from the bad people, and he tries to make me happy and smile, even though it's hard to smile. Kota blinked in shock at her admission before starting to feel guilty. He saved you? Yeah. I remember how warm his hands were when he held me. We went super fast. There were big booms and flashes of blue light. When I can't sleep, he holds me, and his VOD. They keep me safe, too. Kota gulped and looked away. That's nice. I'm sorry about your parents. I think they would still want to be here. Kota gasped and looked at his feet. You think so? Yeah. I think anybody wants to come home. Everybody says they died heroes. Kota spat out as tears pooled in his eyes. Maybe so, but that doesn't change that they wanted to come back to you, I think. And Kota broke down, finally feeling vindicated. The clones nearby, hidden in the forest and outcroppings of the mountain, could only mourn for two children forced to grow up far earlier than they had any right to. Izuka would be so proud of you, Eri. 99 whispered from a tree before turning to Barb. She's wise for her age. Barb noted with some sadness. That she is. Come on. We should prepare for tonight for the forest scare. Hashtag Patrol Charlie. Come in. Report your status. Hashtag Crunch. The comlink was destroyed by a black boot. The machinery grinded even more into the dirt by the heel. These are supposed to be the retainers of the man who defeated Master Stain? Pathetic. A scaly-looking kid spat as he dropped the corpse of one of the armored soldiers. They're all so cute, completely chopped up and bloody though. A blonde girl gushed, hugging a clone with a cut throat so his blood spilled all over her, before slowly bringing her mouth down to the wound and began drinking it. The flesh must eat? A man completely sealed in a full-up straight suit rasped as his blade-like teeth brought up a chopped-off hand and started eating it, the sickening sounds of bone crunching being audible with each chomp. The darlings weren't much of a threat once they lost their little toys. Another villain with a steel beam said, crushing a blaster with one hand. You, however, were useless, the patched-up villain said to a kid wearing a gas mask. Oh, so it's my fault these bucketheads have air filtration systems? He hissed, kicking a dead clone hard enough to snap the neck of the corpse. Would you please be quiet, gentlemen? You're gonna get us caught. Another villain. This one wearing a mask and a top hat, along with black pants, a vest and orange shirt side.
The
villains paused in slight horror as they saw the light from a flare streak up into the sky. What? No way. I slit all of their throats. Hee. Ha ha. They heard and they slowly turned to see the falling arm of a clone. His visor was broken, so they could see the blood trailing over the green eye that was staring at them in amusement and anger. You. Nice try. Patchwork, the clone coughed out, his words wet with blood that dripped down from his helmet onto his chest plate. Immediately, multiple flares began to light the night sky from other clone groups. The surprise had been ruined, all by a single clone. Dobby snarled as he unleashed his blue hellfire at the clone, torching him to cinders, not even giving him a chance to scream. The plan's been shot. Send them in. Dobby roared in fury. Soon enough, blaster fire echoed in the forest. Dobby turned to see the burning clone, the helmet having been knocked off by the fire, but it did nothing for the rictus grin left behind. Stop laughing, he growled before turning around and storming off. They'd lost the element of surprise, but they wouldn't lose their prize. The students had been sent into the forest in groups of 5 with an additional 2 clones, each walking a specified route with other clones and students lying in wait to scare them. I've got a bad feeling about this. Bondo muttered, hating this part of the camp. Man up, big guy. It's only a bit like a haunted house. Plus, it's not like we're walking straight into an ambush, Heavy chuckled, while Thorn most likely rolled his eyes beneath his helmet. Heavy, I appreciate you trying to lighten the mood, but we need to be on guard, Itsuka said, just as the sky lit up, making everyone look towards it to see a flare, followed by more and more with the students and clones who had been hiding coming out. Flares? But that could only mean, Sir, biohazard detected heading towards us. A clone said to Thorn, who checked his wrist and saw on a scanner that something strange was mixing in the air, just as a purple gas began to emerge in the distance. Everyone, pressurize your helmets, prepare your weapons, and get the students to safety. The camp has been compromised. I repeat, the camp has been dashed. Before Thorn finished his warning, something red flew towards him, causing him to dodge just as it impacted a tree, leaving a very familiar scorch mark. Looking at it in shock, the group suddenly heard the sound of metallic marching approaching. Kodai, he said to the selectively mute girl, who nodded and reached into her pocket, bringing out some small objects before giving them back their proper size, revealing them to be two Z6 rotary blasters. Picking them up, Heavy and Thorn prepared for whatever was approaching, while backing away with the students and their brothers. Meanwhile, on top of a large cliff, Sentinel and Orion looked on in worry, the former extending a folded device with a blade he had on his back into a blaster and the latter taking out an axe of all things. Sentinel, can you keep watch? With a vantage point such as this, we'll need the support from above. I will, Orion. Go. Orion nodded before leaping off the cliff, using the axe to slow down his descent. Sentinel used his long-range scope, hoping to get details of what was attacking them. Stay strong, my brothers. This is all your fault. Monoma screeched. You and that worthless brother of yours have done nothing but bring us trouble since the beginning. Oh, really? Noble yelled as he pushed Monoma away from him. I'd thought you'd want to be here. After all, here's your chance, right? Don't be ridiculous, clone. Monoma seethed, wanting nothing more than to knock the other boy's helmet clean off his head. Ever since the USJ, you clones have lorded your supposed superiority over us, and we're left to the sidelines. Oh, I'm being ridiculous? Noble asked sarcastically. Since the day you antagonized Mandalore, you've been nothing but a hateful, jealous, spiteful little Shabir. You've got your head so far up your ass that you would rather split off from the one group you were assigned to, just to satisfy your own pride. But like I said, here's your chance to prove yourself against real villains and see if it's as funny as you think it is. Now if you will excuse me, I have real people I need to rescue, Noble spat, throwing Monoma's most often used insult about clones not being real people right back at him, before storming off towards the sound of battle, leaving behind the blonde boy. He'll come back. That little coward won't last a moment without me, Monoma huffed, bust before he heard a growl a few meters away from him. Monoma chilled as he realized something very important. He had nothing on him to provide a quirk to fight with, and as he turned to face the hulking creature that appeared to be some kind of mass of worms with a cannon of all things attached to it, he felt very much in danger. Koda grumbled to himself. Despite feeling a bit better thanks to the small talk earlier, he still felt that the concept of heroes and villains were stupid. What did that 99 and Barb guy know? And why did Eri keep following him? We know what it's like to lose family too. We lost over 1,000 of our brothers during our first fight, and they can't come back. Sure, they died heroes, but it does nothing for the fact that we can't see them again. Your parents died heroes, kid, but I don't doubt that if they could have changed anything, they would have done so to come back home to you. You deserve that and more. Stupid clones. Then the lights began to soar in the sky, and he immediately felt that something was wrong. Hey kid. Koda felt a chill run down his spine and shakily got to his feet before turning and seeing the mountain of a man next to him and the horned girl who'd also gotten up, looking just as shocked. Nice hat. Want to trade for this stupid mask? The villain asked as he took it off. Koda froze in fear.
Mama, Papa.
The man was wearing blue cowboy pants and a black tank top, while having some of his left face missing along with his eye. You look familiar, Runt, have we met before? He grinned. Kota, despite being too afraid to answer, felt his body move in front of the white-haired girl without thinking and holding his arms out to shield her. Oh, playing the hero now, are we? Well, let's see how long you last, little man. He laughed and leaped at them with a manic grin. 2. The villain stopped dead in his tracks as pain shot through his right shoulder, landing face first onto the ground as he looked over his shoulder, enraged over who dared to interrupt his fun, before noticing one of those pesky clones aiming a pistol at him. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. The clone said, the moonlight revealing him as 99, his words dripping with venom, while the villain only began to grin once more. Oh, think you can take me on, little man? Who said I was alone? Suddenly, the hissing and clicking of blasters could be heard all around, as the villain noticed he was surrounded from all sides, guns pointed at him. Barb, take the kids and go. Report this to Locke and Mandalore. We'll take care of this scum. Hashtag multiple reports of enemy action. We're under attack, RGH. Hashtag. Hashtag they're coming from every edge. Hashtag. Hashtag there's too many. We can't hold them OFFGUGH. Hashtag. Hashtag I can't get a signal outside of the forest. We're unable to contact the UA battalion. Hashtag. The chaotic comms did nothing to ease Izuku's nerves, but he knew that whatever was attacking them wasn't good, and they needed to be organized.
Cancelletto Vode.
Emandlor speaking. Get the students back to the lodge and form a defensive perimeter. Horn Company. Secure Eri and Kota. Exterior patrols find out what's going on and fall back. Hashtag. Hashtag this is Barb. I've got Eri and Kota. We're heading back to the lodge. Horn Company is engaging an enemy that tried to attack them. Hashtag. I want men heading to Barb's position now. Guardshell, you're with me. Dreadlock shouted, as they ran off towards the position, or in the latter's case, flew with a jetpack. Hashtag Mandalore. We've got multiple hostiles. There's some kind of robots? Droids? And they've got blasters too. We're losing our minage. Smokescreen?
Comin.
Smokescreen. Izuku yelled into the wrist comm, which only replied with static. Her. Izuku and his group paused as they heard the haunting laughter echo in the forest. Midoriya Izuku, or should I call you Mandalore? Apprentice to the great All Might? The voice echoed more, causing all the clones around him to close ranks and point their weapons. I've been meaning to achieve my vengeance against All Might, and what better way than to destroy his successor? You'll have to show yourself to find out. You'll find that I'm a lot harder to beat than you might think, Izuku said as he summoned a blaster. Of course, I am not without mercy nor honor. I know that you've taken up the sword, Malanki Jeroe, little hero, so how about we see how well you fare? A glint of metal caught their attention, and they saw a sword flying in the air before landing in the dirt in front of them. Izuku grimaced, but knew that whoever this opponent was wouldn't let them fight normally. He sorely wished to have the Darksaber with him right now, but it was back at the lodge with the rest of his armor. Fine then, you want a sword fight. I'll give you a sword fight. One of you head back and get me the Darksaber. I think I'll need it soon. Izuku ordered, one of the clones nodding before heading back. They can run, but I guarantee that no backup will get here in time to save you. The unknown person laughed even more as Izuku picked up the sword. Then let's get to it. Show yourself. As you wish, Malanki Jeroe. A cloaked figure then crashed into the ground with an explosion of dust and dirt before he slowly rose to his quite considerable height. He's as tall as All Might. Burning yellow eyes glowed from behind the hood of the cloak, and even with the flashlights of the clones, there was no change to his features. The figure then revealed two swords, scimitars as black as the night. And might I know the name of my opponent? He. I am Tyazki, former Verkhovny Voynikolnik, Supreme Warlord, of the Kalish. Although perhaps you do know of me as a different name in your native tongue, boy, Tyazki said with a menacing chuckle. And Izuku was suddenly very afraid, because he knew about this monster from his extensive study of All Might's career. I do, General Grievous. Author. Insert Russian General Grievous theme by Samuel Kim. And now we've hit the beginning of what everybody's been waiting for. Yes, expect for a lot of things to happen in the next chapter. I honestly don't have much to say, but I do have some omax, based off the medieval MHA and TFB. Hey, Aizawa? A 12-year-old Katsuma asked. Yes? Aizawa replied, the old knight driving the horse and carriage across the field. How come Izuku can't speak normally? Like, I know he uses that magical binary song to be heard, but he covers his mouth with that mask, and what happened to his voice? It was severely damaged in battle. How? How do you think? Tragically, of course, Aizawa replied before going into the story. A battle waged in a city in the war-torn kingdom of UA. It happened at Jaku. Our brave scout was captured by All for One forces and interrogated. But he refused to provide intel. Izuku, held up by the demonic-looking warlord, the latter glaring as the former's eyes weakly sparked with fading magic, and paid a grave price for his courage. Izuku's limp body splayed on top of a stone slab. Izuku was left for dead, but UA troops found him and evacuated him to a triage facility, where a field medic managed to stabilize his condition. Healing magics being used by a healer looming over Izuku's battered body, his visage grim but stern, desperately trying to save him. Aizawa's eyes focused again as he was brought back to current events. So, we owe Izuku's life to that field medic, Katsuma said with relief. That's one way of looking at it, I suppose. Though the medic could have done better, Aizawa replied, and Katsuma sighed before looking forward. Final battle. The war had culminated to this very point. All Might, champion of the kingdom of UA, fighting against the Dark Warlord, All for One. Brutal blows were delivered against each other as they ruthlessly fought for control of the Omega Lock, an artifact that could be used to restore the kingdom of UA by restoring the Magicore, or devastating their current home by unleashing raw magic onto the kingdom of Mustafesu. All dependent on how it was used. All Might, Aizawa shouted from a higher outcropping of the volcano, the very lava having been transformed into pure magical energy that glowed like the heavens. You must use the saber to destroy the Omega Lock. All Might delivered another punch against his nemesis, making him crash against a wall. It is the only way to save Mustafesu. All Might heard before hearing the musical chimes of Izuku, the latter carrying a large blade with both hands and running along the outcroppings. One for all. All for One snarled before getting up and slamming All Might away. Izuku leaped into the air, One for All in his hands as he crossed over the pit. All for One quickly fired 3 of his signature magic cannons from his hand, the blast streaking through the air, a 4th being deflected by All Might, pushing the hand away as he crashed into his enemy. But it was too late. Time appeared to slow down as the first blast impacted against Izuku's chest, making him lose his grip on the blade, the force breaking and burning him. Aizawa couldn't move, paralyzed in shock. Then the second hit him, causing even more damage. Tenya tried to move forward but was brought down by enemy soldiers, and he could only fall to his knees and watch. Then the third hit, with One for All already falling away as Izuku's body started to fall. All Might could only stare in horror as Izuku's body began to fall toward the pool of magic. Ochako couldn't even believe it, so much so that her magic began to fail against Shigaraki's own. Izuku's eyes briefly flickered with magic, fire and blood erupting from his chest before his eyes went blank. The fire then extinguished by itself, the corroding magic fading away, leaving behind only smoke and ash. One for All clattered onto the ground as Izuku's body fell into the pool before disappearing, absorbed by the magic. Shigaraki smiled as Ochako froze, Tenya barely able to whisper a no, while Shota could only stare at the spot that his friend had disappeared into. All Might stared at the spot as well before turning to All for One, the latter, having lost his face, using a half mask with demonic horns, magical red eyes peering through the black and staring at him with a sadistic grin. All Might glared in grief and fury. "Nu!" he roared as he gave a brutal right cross to All for One's face and then a left uppercut. Soon after were a series of horrible blows against his worst enemy, now defenseless against the grief-fueled onslaught. All for One crashed into a wall harshly before falling to the ground with a groan. Looking up, he saw a familiar hilt. All Might walked forward, his own magic charging up around his fist as he prepared to deal the final blow. All for One growled and then roared as he swung his own anti-blade, the purple energy crashing into the wide-eyed All Might's chest and flinging him across to a cliff edge and over. All for One got up and stomped over to the cliff edge to see a groaning All Might hanging by one hand. "Prepare to join your scout," All for One snarled and raised his sword, ready to send him falling to his death. In the mage spark, All for One, he heard before turning to face whoever was the newest interloper. "Shang, Herg." All for One grunted and then began to gasp as he looked down at the blade piercing his chest. One for all, and holding it, Izuku. Flesh and bone was being regenerated by magic itself, as the young man stared at the dying demon lord in contempt. "You took my voice," Izuku said, his mask moving with each movement of his jaw. "You will never rob anyone of anything, ever again." All for One grunted as he raised his sword before losing his grip, the blade falling off into the deep chasm below. With another grunt, he fell to his knee, all who were watching unable to believe their eyes. "Ha-hair," he gasped out, the lights of his eyes flickering with each breath as he gripped the blade. "Lord All for One."
No.
Shigaraki yelled as he fell to his knees. Meanwhile, Tenya broke free from the foot soldiers, they too, shocked by the sight. Ochako and Kurojairi should be battling, but they were in fact stuck in their respective places. Shota could only stare, disbelieving, and All Might could only stare in awe. The purple light that emitted from All for One's chest where the blade pierced him then completely faded, and the eyes of All for One, the great demon lord, destroyer of an entire realm, went black. He slowly began to slide back, the sword leaving his chest as he fell off the cliff, his hand being the last thing to touch the blade as he fell off and into the dark chasm below. All Might could only stare at his enemy, an unknown emotion in his eyes before looking up to see a hand reaching out. He quickly grabbed the hand and was helped up by Izuku. Meanwhile, the rest of the enemies could only stare in horror. "I will avenge you, Lord All for One," Shigaraki screamed before being pulled back by Kurojairi. "Shigaraki, don't be a fool. Curse you and your logic." Shigaraki screams as he's dragged away, the rest of the foot soldiers following them. All Might and Izuku meet up with the others, who can only look at him in awe. "Izuku!" Aizawa exclaimed. "Your voice!" Ochako cheered. "My voice, what are you my voice?" Izuku exclaimed in shock before shakily removing his mask. "Aizawa!" Izuku happily cries out as he hugs the older man. "I have my cords back." Yes, we noticed." Aizawa chuckled out. "The mana?" Izuku noted. "It is the only possible explanation," Shota said with a soft smile. "It would seem the old field medic made good after all," All Might said with a smile of his own. "All might to all forces," he said with a spell. "All for One is no more." Author: I've been meaning to put this omake in for a while. I hope you have fun with it, King Kuma.